This time, let your brother have a baby. You can have another one later. I told my parents I was pregnant. Then my mom said something shocking. Zach and his wife Rosie, who can't have kids, want us to give them our baby for adoption. My parents always favored Zach and ignored me. The happy future I imagined with my first baby turned into sadness. I'm Olivia. I've been married to Walt for 3 years. We're happy and thinking about having a baby soon. But I haven't been close to my family because of issues with my parents and brother Zach. In our family house, my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie all live together. Zach has been praised since he was little, excelling in school and landing a job at a big company, which he'll probably take over from Dad. Our parents have always adored him. I, on the other hand, didn't stand out academically and wasn't as good looking, so I never felt that close to our parents. I often felt left out and lonely because Zach got so much attention. Mom especially favored him, always by his side and hardly ever paying attention to me. When she did talk to me, it was usually criticism. Zach followed Mom's lead and didn't treat me well either, so we never really got along. I felt like I didn't belong at home and became more and more isolated. Because of that, right after finishing high school, I moved out. My parents didn't seem bothered when I told them I was leaving. If anything, they seemed happy about it. After leaving, I found a job, and 3 years later, I married Walt, who was in the same class as me. I wanted to start my own family and find peace away from my parents' influence. I only go back home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I don't really want to, but my parents insist. They care a lot about appearances, and it wouldn't look good if their daughter never visited. So I put up with it and visit twice a year. I reluctantly went back this Thanksgiving, but my mother was as distant as ever. "You and your husband are still not that impressive," she said, dampening the festive atmosphere. She started being sarcastic right away. She only called us back to say such things. If she's going to be like this, she shouldn't even bother calling, I thought, trying to ignore her sarcasm. But she kept going. "We're worried about you. You two live so modestly. We always think you'll come asking for money. My family is pretty wealthy, but since I left, I've never asked for financial help. Walt and I manage fine on our own earnings. We even send them proper birthday gifts. We would never do that," I quickly replied to her unfounded accusation. Then she said, "But you two are still earning modestly, right?" and turned to look at Walt next to me. "Walt, you're still at that detective agency, right? How long do you plan to stick with that questionable job? Aren't you embarrassed?" Indeed, Walt works as a detective, something she always mocks. She sees detective work as sketchy and inferior to regular jobs. As Walt tried to explain his job to her, Zach jumped in. "Mom, there's no point in even listening to that. Detective work is shady, something nobody respectable does. It's a job for people beneath us. The pay must be peanuts compared to mine," showing off his superiority. Zach shared her disdain for detective work, a sentiment we've heard since we got married. Walt stayed quiet, but I felt upset that his job was being dismissed outright. Walt has always been my support, understanding what my family is like since our college days. That's why he always joins me when we visit my parents, not wanting to leave me alone. Even though he knows it won't be pleasant, I still feel guilty about it. Like many visits before, this one ended on a sour note. Around that time, we decided to live modestly together, unaffected by my family's opinions. Something amazing happened in our 3rd year of marriage. I found out I was pregnant. I was thrilled to be expecting our first child. Knowing how my parents always put me down, I felt like I had to share the news with them, so I went to our family home to tell them. It had been a while since I visited outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie were all there, but their reaction to my announcement caught me off guard. When my mother heard the news, she suddenly got loud. "How could you say that in front of Zach?" Her response was unexpected. I wasn't expecting congratulations, but this was different. I was confused by her mentioning Zach, and when I looked puzzled, she dropped a bombshell. "Zach and Rosie can't have kids. How could you be so insensitive?" I had no clue they were dealing with infertility. Shocked by her words, I glanced at them. Zach seemed uncomfortable, and Rosie looked down sadly. "You're having a baby before Zach. If it wasn't for Rosie, this wouldn't be happening." My mother sighed dramatically, looking between Rosie and me. Seeing this, Zach stepped in. "Rosie already feels bad enough. Don't be too hard on her, Mom." I was surprised to hear him defend Rosie. From what I knew from my visits, Zach wasn't usually that supportive of her. "You're really kind, Zach." Then Zach said something that made me pause. "Rosie, if it weren't for being married to Zach, you would have been divorced by now." My mother shot Rosie a glare. Maybe despite everything, Zach does care about his wife. As I watched Zach calm our mother down, I thought about what had just happened. Well, I shared my news, so I should head home, I said, feeling the tension rise because of my announcement. But then my mother said something unbelievable. "Give your baby to Zach." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Give my baby to Zach. Why should I? I can have another baby if I want to. Just because Rosie can't have children doesn't mean I should give mine away. That's unfair and ridiculous. When I refused, my mother argued, "This is our first grandchild. It should be raised by us. Zach will take over the company, so we should raise the baby." Her words made me furious. She was planning to take my unborn child just to ensure a successor for our father's company. She talked about adoption like she had it all planned out, but I was too angry to listen. I was already irritated, and then Zach said something shocking. "Well, since Rosie can't have kids, it's good for her that you got pregnant. You're finally doing something for the family." I couldn't believe it, but Zach seemed to agree with my mom. Even Dad, who usually stays quiet, nodded along. It felt like the whole family was claiming my baby as their own. I couldn't believe how casually Zach spoke to his own wife like that, acting like it was no big deal. I realized there was no point in arguing further, so I left right away. All they said was, "Give us an answer next time you come," and didn't even come to say goodbye. Rosie, who must have been hurt, silently watched me leave. Even after I got home, I couldn't shake off my anger. Instead of celebrating my pregnancy, they made this unreasonable demand. I felt gloomy thinking about the future. They'd probably keep pushing for adoption even after the baby was born. When I told Walt what happened after he got back from work, he was shocked too. Even he couldn't find the words to respond. He knows my family, but this was beyond belief. A few days later, we were surprised by an unexpected visitor at home. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" "It's rare to see you alone," I said to Rosie. She looked tired, with dull skin and messy hair. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at us. "Olivia, I'm really sorry about what happened the other day," she said, referring to when I announced my pregnancy. It wasn't her fault, but she seemed burdened by the unreasonable demands my family had made. Then she said she had something important to discuss. "What is it?" I asked, inviting her in to talk. What she told me was shocking, and my anger flared up again. Trying to stay calm, she shared a significant truth with me. Walt had been quietly listening to our conversation, and then chimed in with something equally astonishing and infuriating. Rosie's tears started again as she listened to Walt. With this new information from both of them, I made a decision. I vowed to myself to hold my parents and Zach accountable, to settle past grievances and seek justice. 3 months later, with my belly starting to show, Walt and I visited my family home. My parents, Zach and Rosie, were there. Without even a greeting, my mother asked, "You've decided to give the baby to Zach, right?" It seemed like she couldn't think of anything else. As I said before, that's not happening. I replied, but my parents glared at me as if they couldn't accept it. "No matter what you say, we're taking that baby. Stop being stubborn," my mother said, clearly angered by my refusal. Zach and my father just watched, not intervening. "No matter how much you insist, I'll never give the baby away. But I came here today to show you something." "Is that okay, Rosie?" I asked, looking at Rosie, who nodded silently. Rosie intends to divorce Zach, and this is why. I pulled out some photos from an envelope I had brought. That was the reason for my visit today. Zach was speechless as he looked at the photos. They clearly showed him kissing another woman and entering a hotel. Undeniable proof of his infidelity. "Shocked to have been caught," he muttered. "Who took these photos?" Our parents, standing next to Zach, looked bewildered, their gaze shifting between him and me. They probably had no idea about his affair. "It was Walt who took these," I said. Walt, who had been silently observing, explained how he had come across the photos. As a detective, he had seen Zach with another woman while working on a case. Out of curiosity, he investigated further and found out about Zach's affair. The decisive moment was captured in those photos, as Zach thought he had cleverly hidden his affair. He was stunned and speechless. "Adultery is grounds for divorce. You need to compensate Rosie properly," I said, breaking the tense silence. But Zach, instead of apologizing, blamed Rosie for his actions. "Yeah, it's your fault, Rosie. You're so incompetent. I'm just having a little fun outside," he said, with our mother backing him up, trying to shift the blame away from Zach. Seeing Rosie treated like I once was made me feel terribly sorry for her. So I decided to confront my family to save both of us. I pushed them further by pointing out Zach's faults. "Zach, you mocked Walt, but a professional detective's skills are extraordinary. Evidence kept piling up as soon as he started investigating. And we found out something shocking about your mistress," I said, watching my parents tense up, wondering what would come next. "The woman you're seeing seems to be the daughter of a mafia boss," I revealed, watching Zach freeze in shock. He must not have known that. My mother screamed, "What? Is that true?" Upon hearing the revelation, she collapsed to the ground, covering her face, while my father looked terrified. "Zach, you were pretending to be single, right?" I asked, and Zach started to panic. "No, I didn't know either." Our parents, who had been so authoritative just moments ago, were now completely bewildered by this unexpected revelation. Then Rosie spoke up amidst the confusion. "You didn't just deceive your mistress, did you?" Her words brought tension back into the room. She repeated what she had told me during her visit. "You're infertile, aren't you?" Zach's face betrayed a look of realization. Our parents stared at him in shock. They had blamed Rosie for their infertility issues, but the truth was it was Zach himself. "Did you know, Rosie?" That was all he could manage to say. Our stunned parents struggled to find their next words, visibly shaken by the revelation. Rosie delivered the final blow. "I found out accidentally while cleaning the room." She had stumbled upon his infertility diagnosis hidden in his desk drawer. Unable to admit it to his loving parents, Zach had kept this fact a secret and blamed Rosie for their infertility. Believing his words, our parents had unfairly blamed Rosie. His protective comments about Rosie when I announced my pregnancy were probably driven by his guilt over the issue. Blamed for something she had no control over, Rosie suffered every day. As the conversation turned to the topic of taking my child, Rosie spoke with a calm, unchanged expression. Meanwhile, my parents, just learning the shocking truth, were in a panic. "To think Zach will never have a child, that's just..." My mother began, despairing at the thought of not having a grandchild. But then she turned her hysterical anger towards him. "You knew it was your fault, yet you blamed your wife. Did you cheat because you knew you were infertile? How come my son stooped so low? Oh dear, why did this happen?" She vented her frustration at him. Finally, Zach spoke, offering a pitiful explanation. "I was shocked to find out I was infertile. I felt guilty for not giving you a grandchild. When I found out Olivia was pregnant with a boy, it just seemed convenient." His words filled me with contempt. Pushing aside my anger, I delivered the final blow to the three of them. "Your selfish actions hurt Rosie and me. And Zach, you had an affair with such a dangerous person. Mom and Dad, you'll have to face the consequences of your actions. You've hurt so many people, now it's time to face the music." My words prompted them to apologize, their earlier bravado gone. "Where did that confidence go when you asked me to give up my son?" I looked at them with disdain, feeling as though I was looking at garbage. Beside me, Rosie remained silent, her gaze fixed ahead, silently conveying the depth of her sorrow. Tough times lay ahead for Zach and my parents. When the father of Zach's mistress discovered the affair, they were summoned and forced to apologize repeatedly. Despite ending the affair, Zach had to pay a hefty compensation for deceiving the woman. The amount was staggering, teaching them the harsh consequences of getting involved with such people. As a result, our family home descended into chaos. My father had to step down as company president due to the public scandal, and my mother became isolated, shunned by the neighbors, and withdrawing into herself. Their relationship became hostile, constantly arguing over Zach's actions. Zach lost his job after the scandal reached his company, and to add to his troubles, his divorce with Rosie was finalized. Struggling with unemployment and financial burdens, Zach found himself trapped in a cycle of relentless work. Around the time Rosie successfully left the family home, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both the baby and I were in good health, and I reveled in the joy of welcoming new life. Our family of three embarked on happy days together. Eventually, Walt and I made the decision to sever all ties with my family. Although I have been torn about cutting off contact with my parents and brother, that incident made me realize it was the best decision for my son's well-being. Despite their absence, I have found solace and love in my irreplaceable family. From now on, I choose to cherish only my precious family.
It all started in a way that you'd least expect. My name's Olivia, and I was just another face in the corporate world, grinding away my days until Jack walked into my life. He was a client for the firm I worked at, and our first meeting was anything but ordinary. There was this spark, an instant click, something that made the air crackle with energy whenever we were in the same room. "Olivia, right? Heard you're the wizard with numbers around here," Jack said on the day we met, his voice laced with a grin that I could hear before I saw it. "Wizard might be stretching it, but I know my way around them," I replied, trying to keep my composure. Who was this guy, coming in and throwing words like wizard around? Our conversations quickly moved from strictly business to personal interests, dreams, and eventually, our views on life. It was like finding a piece of myself that I didn't know was missing. Jack was charming, not just in a smooth talker kind of way, but genuinely caring. He listened, really listened, and that was rare. We started seeing each other outside of work, and each date felt like we were peeling back layers, revealing more and more of ourselves. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. "I can't believe you actually enjoy pineapple on pizza," I teased during one of our dinner dates. "Hey, don't knock it till you try it. It's the perfect combo of sweet and savory," Jack defended, his eyes lighting up with the kind of passion people reserve for sports teams or favorite bands. "That sounds like something only a madman would say," I shot back, laughter bubbling up from the pit of my stomach. Jack's laugh joined mine, filling the space around us with warmth. Those moments felt like we were in our little world, far away from the prying eyes and expectations of reality. 6 months flew by in a blur of shared smiles, whispered secrets, and dreams laid bare. Then, almost impulsively, Jack proposed. It was messy, unplanned, and in the middle of our favorite dive bar. No grand gestures or hidden photographers, just raw emotion. "Olivia, I know this isn't fancy. I don't have a ring yet, and we're surrounded by the smell of stale beer, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. Marry me?" His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. In that moment, I realized how deeply I had fallen. "Yes, but if we're doing this, we're doing it our way. No fuss, just us." Our marriage was quick, just like our decision. We didn't need a big wedding. All that mattered was the promise we made to each other. We moved into Jack's place, a cozy little house that suddenly felt like home because we were together. Life with Jack was like living in a bubble, perfect and undisturbed, until Linda, his mom, decided it was her mission to burst it. Living next door, she had this uncanny timing of showing up right when we least expected or wanted her to. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as Jack and I were lounging on the couch, there was a knock on the door. Before we could even pretend we weren't home, Linda barged in like a hurricane on a mission. "Olivia, darling, how are you?" she bellowed, her voice carrying that peculiar mix of concern and accusation. "I'm good, Linda. Just enjoying the weekend," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Enjoying, huh? You know what would make weekends better? A grandchild running around," she shot back, her eyes darting between Jack and me, as if her mere gaze could impregnate me. Jack, ever the peacemaker, tried to lighten the mood. "Mom, we've talked about this. We're not in a rush." Linda wasn't having any of it. "Not in a rush? I had Jack when I was your age, Olivia. The clock is ticking, you know." Her words hung in the air, a constant reminder of the pressure she was piling on us. It wasn't just the occasional comments anymore, it was every single visit. Dinners were marred by her pointed questions and comparisons to her friends' children, who were apparently popping out grandchildren left, right, and center. One evening, she overstepped more than usual. We were at her place for what was supposed to be a peaceful dinner. The main course wasn't the only thing served, Linda dished out her ultimatum as well. "Olivia, I've been patient, but I need to know. Are you even capable of giving me grandchildren? Linda's voice was sharp, each word slicing through the pretense of a familial meal. I was taken aback, anger boiling in my veins. Linda, that's way out of line. We'll have kids when and if we want to. And when we're ready, not because you're demanding it. Jack finally found his voice, though it was softer than I'd hoped. Mom, Olivia's right. This isn't just about what you want. But Linda was relentless. Fine, if you won't do it for me, do it for yourselves. But I want you to get checked out. I need to know the problem isn't from your side. The nerve of her, as if bearing children was some family duty I was failing at. Jack looked at me, his eyes apologetic. Maybe you should, Liv. Just to get her off our backs. I agreed, but on one condition. Fine, but you're getting checked too, Jack. Fair's fair. Okay. Anything for peace, he conceded, though I could tell he was just as annoyed. The whole ordeal of getting tested was humiliating and invasive, not to mention completely unnecessary in my eyes. But it turned out to be an eye-opener in ways we hadn't anticipated. Jack's results came back, and the irony of the situation wasn't lost on us. The issue Linda was so concerned about, the delay in expanding our little family, stemmed from her precious son. The aftermath was a blend of vindication and sorrow. I wasn't sure how to feel. I wanted to rage at Linda, to throw her words back in her face, but I also saw the man I loved crumbling under the weight of his own imperfections. Linda's reaction was predictably unsupportive. Instead of rallying around her son, she doubled down on her blame game, pointing fingers at me for not being understanding enough, for not caring for Jack in his time of need. And Jack? Well, he wasn't the same. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by shadows of doubt and shame. He retreated into himself, leaving me to fend off Linda's barbs alone. Jack's struggle with the news about his fertility hit him harder than a freight train. Instead of facing it head-on, he looked for escape in booze, letting the bottles drown out his sorrows and shame. Nights turned into a blur, with him either passed out or staring into nothing, a whiskey bottle his only company. One evening, I couldn't just watch him spiral anymore. Jack, this ain't the way, you know. We gotta face this thing together, not let it tear us apart, I said, my voice a mix of frustration and worry. He just scoffed, the smell of alcohol heavy in his words. Face what, Olivia? That I'm a failure? That I can't give you kids? What's the damn point? It's not about that, Jack. It's about us, finding a way through. The doctors said it was unlikely, not impossible. Maybe see other doctors, explore other options. I tried to get through to him, but it was like talking to a wall. Other options? You mean raising some other guy's kid? That ain't gonna be my child, Olivia. How am I supposed to live with that? His words were like daggers, but I knew it was the booze and pain talking. Any child we raise would be ours, Jack. Ours. It doesn't matter how they come to us, I countered, but it was like I was speaking a foreign language to him. He just shook his head, sinking further into the couch and his despair. You don't get it, Liv. You'll never get it. That night was just the start. Jack began blowing off work, first with sick calls, then not even bothering. His job, once his pride, now seemed like just another burden. Linda, his mom, only added fuel to the fire. Olivia's not doing enough for you, Jack. A real wife would have you out of this slump, she accused one day, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I had enough and shot back. Doing enough? I'm trying to keep us afloat here, Linda. But he needs more than just me yelling at him. He needs help, real help, not just your complaints. Linda glared at me, her voice icy. My son doesn't need some shrink. He needs his family. And a wife who's actually there for him. Her words stung, but I knew standing by Jack was all I was doing, even as he slipped further away, becoming a ghost in his own life. I tried again one night, the silence heavy between us. Jack, we can't go on like this. I can't watch you tear yourself apart. I love you, damn it. For a moment, there was a glimmer of the old Jack in his eyes. "I don't know how to stop this, Liv. I'm lost." It was a crack in his armor, but promises made in desperation are fragile. And as time went on, the depth of Jack's descent became painfully clear. The last straw was his job. They fired him for showing up drunk, if he showed up at all. After that, he just lay on the couch all day, a shell of the man I married. Whenever I tried to reach out, to pull him back, he'd just head to Linda's, seeking refuge in the one place that never seemed to help. Days blurred into each other, each one a repeat of the last, Jack on the couch, lost in his own misery, and me, juggling 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. It felt like we were stuck in a never-ending storm with no way out. But then, something changed. It was a regular Thursday evening when I found out. I'd been feeling off for a while, sick in the mornings, and just not myself. On a whim, I picked up a pregnancy test. I remember standing in our cramped bathroom, waiting for the result, my heart hammering in my chest. When the positive sign showed up, I couldn't believe it. I was pregnant. I remember the moment I decided to tell Jack. He was on the couch, staring off into nothing, a half-empty bottle of beer in his hand. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I had this crazy hope that maybe, just maybe, this news would snap him out of whatever hole he'd fallen into. "Jack, I have something to tell you." I'm pregnant," I said, the words feeling both heavy and light at the same time. Jack's reaction was nothing like I'd hoped. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "Pregnant? How the hell is that possible? You know what the doctor said about me." I tried to keep my voice steady, to explain the situation calmly. "Jack, the doctor said it was unlikely, not impossible. This baby is ours." But Jack wasn't having any of it. He got up, his anger palpable. "Ours? Don't give me that crap, Olivia. You've been cheating on me, haven't you? That's the only way this makes sense." Before I could even process what he was saying, Linda barged in, her timing as impeccable as ever. "What's all this shouting about?" she demanded. Jack was quick to fill her in, his words twisted by bitterness. "Olivia's pregnant. Claims it's mine, but we both know that's a lie." Linda turned on me, her eyes flashing with accusation. "You ungrateful little. After everything we've done for you, you go and betray my son like this?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Betray him? "Linda, I've been here, trying to make things work, even when Jack gave up. This baby is his, whether you like it or not." The argument spiraled from there, with both of them hurling accusations and demands. Linda, in her infinite wisdom, decided I should leave. "Get out of this house, Olivia. We don't need a liar and a cheat under this roof." I was so tired of the fighting, the accusations, the endless cycle of despair. So, I agreed. "Fine. I'll go. But not for you. For this baby, who deserves better than this mess." Jack didn't stop me. He didn't say a word as I walked out the door, my heart heavy, but my resolve strong. This baby was my glimmer of hope, and I was going to do everything in my power to protect it, to give it the life it deserved. Away from all the chaos, away from a love that had turned so toxic it was unrecognizable. Starting over wasn't easy, not by a long shot. There I was, pregnant, alone, and frankly, a bit scared. But there was this fire in me, too, a determination to make things right for the little one growing inside me. I moved into a small, cozy apartment. It wasn't much, but it was ours, mine and the baby's. I picked up extra shifts at work, anything to make sure we'd have what we needed. Nights were the hardest, though. It was just me and my thoughts, and sometimes, the silence was too loud. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat on the worn-out sofa, rubbing my belly, talking to the baby. "It's just you and me, kiddo. But we're gonna make it, you'll see. I'm gonna make sure of it." That's when the phone rang. It was my sister, Lucy. She'd been my rock through all of this. "Hey, Liv. How are you holding up?" Lucy's voice was always a balm, soothing and warm. We're hanging in there. Some days are better than others, I admitted, not wanting to worry her too much. Listen, Liv, you're not alone in this. Remember that. If you need anything, a break, someone to talk to, or just a night off from cooking, you call me, okay? Her words meant the world to me. Thanks, Luce. I really appreciate it. We talked a bit more about nothing in particular. Lucy always had a way of making me laugh, even when I felt like crying. After hanging up, I felt a little lighter, a bit more ready to face the world. As the weeks turned into months, I got to know every inch of that little apartment. I decorated a corner for the baby, putting together a makeshift nursery. It wasn't much, but it was filled with love. As my due date approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. I was about to meet my baby, to start this new chapter for Real. And even though I was doing it on my own, I knew we'd be okay. Life as a single mom had its set of challenges, but me and my little boy, Max, we were doing all right. He was growing up fast, all smiles and curiosity, making all the tough times worth it. Then, one day, life decided to throw us another curveball. I was at the park with Max, pushing him on the swings, when I ran into a face from the past, Tina, an old friend of Jack's. Her expression was a mix of surprise and something else, maybe pity, when she saw us. Olivia? Wow, it's been ages. How are you holding up? Her voice was cautious, like she was walking on eggshells. We're managing, thanks. Max keeps me on my toes, I said, trying to keep the conversation light. Yeah, I heard about, well, everything. I'm sorry, Olivia. For what it's worth, Jack's been going through a rough patch, too. Tina's attempt at being diplomatic was awkward at best. Oh? I prompted, not sure I wanted to know but asking anyway. He got married again. Had another kid, but things didn't go well. There were problems with the baby. He was born, not quite healthy. And then Jack got into trouble for not paying support. It's a mess. Tina's words tumbled out in a rush. Hearing about Jack's troubles stirred up a storm of emotions in me. Part of me felt vindicated, seeing him face consequences for once. But there was no joy in it, especially hearing about another child caught in the middle of his mess. Life has a way of catching up with you, I guess, I said, my voice neutral. Tina nodded, awkwardly shifting from one foot to the other. Yeah, it does. Look, Olivia, I know it's none of my business, but, are you alright? After everything? I looked at Max, who was laughing, urging me to push him higher on the swings. We're more than alright, Tina. We've moved on. And we're happy, really happy. That night, as I tucked Max into bed, I thought about Jack and his other child. My heart ached for that little one, caught in a situation they didn't choose. I whispered a silent prayer for them, hoping they'd find some peace amidst the chaos. Life with Max was a whirlwind of school runs, soccer games, and endless questions. He was my little man, growing up too fast, and I was doing my best to keep up. Our routine was hectic but happy, until one day, a blast from the past turned our world upside down. It was just another day, me and Max doing our usual grocery run, when out of nowhere, Linda, my ex-mother-in-law, shows up. It was like bumping into a ghost from a past life I'd worked hard to forget. As soon as she saw us, her eyes lit up, especially when they landed on Max. Without a second thought, she swooped in, trying to hug him. Max, who's not used to strangers, especially not her, hid behind me. Olivia, let me see my grandson. He looks so healthy, not like the other one, Linda said, a twisted sort of pride in her voice that made my skin crawl. Back off, Linda. You've got no right to come here and make demands. Especially talking like that about a sick child. It's disgusting, I snapped, putting myself between her and Max. She huffed, her face all twisted up in anger. You can't keep me from him, Olivia. He's my grandson too. I have rights. Yeah? Well, it's funny you suddenly remember you've got a grandson now. And as for rights, you lost those the minute you sided with Jack, calling me every name under the sun. Forget it. You're not coming anywhere near Max. I shot back, every word laced with years of pent-up frustration. We left her standing there, fuming. But it didn't end at the store. Later that day, she called, her voice all sweet and poisonous at the same time. Olivia, you're making a mistake. I'll sue if I have to. I want to see my grandson, Linda threatened, thinking she could bully me into submission. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady myself. You really want to go down that road, Linda? Because if we end up in court, I'll make sure everyone knows the kind of person you really are. How you treated me, how you talk about your other grandchild. You think a judge will look kindly on that? There was silence on the line for a few beats, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. You wouldn't dare, she finally hissed. Try me, Linda. I've kept my mouth shut for too long. But I'm done playing nice. Max and we're doing just fine without you. So, you go ahead and try your luck in court. We'll see how far it gets you. After a moment, she hung up, and that was the last I heard from her. I wasn't sure if she believed I'd follow through or if the thought of her dirty laundry being aired in public was too much for her. Either way, Max and I were left in peace. As I tucked him into bed that night, I thought about how far we'd come and how much we'd overcome. Everything's gonna be alright, buddy, I whispered, more to myself than to him. That night, I realized no matter what came our way, we'd face it together, just like we always had. And no one, not even Linda with her threats and bitterness, could take that away from us. Life after Linda's threat had been strangely peaceful. I'd braced for a storm that never came, and in its absence, Max and I found our rhythm again. That peace was shattered when Jack showed up out of the blue. It had been years since I last saw him, and here he was, standing at my door, looking worn and tired. Olivia, can we talk? Jack's voice was low, hesitant. I hesitated, my hand on the door, ready to close it on him and this part of my past. Talk? After all this time, you just show up and want to talk? I know I've got no right to ask anything of you. But I've been through a lot, and I've changed, Olivia. I need help, he said, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. Changed? You think saying you've changed is enough? You walked away, Jack. You chose that path, not me. Max and we'd built a life without you. Why should I let you back into it? Jack looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I'm not asking to come back like nothing happened. I don't know where else to go. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the shell of the man I once loved. It would have been easy to feel pity, to open the door and let him back in. But life had taught me better. Jack, you need to understand something. It's not just about me anymore. There's Max to think about. And I won't let anyone hurt him or disrupt the life we have. You say you've changed, but I can't just take your word for it. You need to prove it, not for me, but for yourself. Jack nodded, a semblance of understanding dawning in his eyes. I get it, Olivia. I really do. I'll try to do better. That's all anyone can ask, Jack. But for now, you need to leave. Max and I have a life, a good one. And I'm not ready to risk that. He took a step back, finally lifting his eyes to meet mine. I understand. Take care of Max, Olivia. He deserves the best. I will, Jack. I always have. Closing the door on Jack was like closing a chapter of my life I never thought I'd revisit. It was hard, but in that moment, I knew I'd made the right decision. Later, as I watched Max play in the backyard, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the lawn, I realized how far we'd come. We'd faced down ghosts from our past and stood our ground, stronger and more united than ever. Mom, look. Max called, waving at me from his makeshift fort. I smiled, walking over to him. What is it, buddy? Just wanted to show you the fort. It's our castle, he said, his eyes shining with pride. Our castle, huh? I like the sound of that. It's our little kingdom, and we protect it together, I said, ruffling his hair. Yeah, together, Max agreed, a big grin on his face. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I knew that no matter what the future held, we'd face it head-on, as a team. Our little family of two was a force to be reckoned with, built on love, resilience, and a firm stand against the challenges life threw our way. And that was all we needed. Living at home with my folks till I was 25 wasn't something I planned out like some strategy, it just felt right, you know? We were tight, like, really tight. Some folks get antsy to bolt the moment they hit 18, but not me. My parents' place was more than just a house, it was home in the realest sense. Didn't see much point in changing that. Then, life threw a curveball. Losing them both to the pandemic felt like someone ripped the ground right out from under me. Suddenly, I was staring at this gaping hole in my life, trying to figure out what comes next. They left me enough money to coast for a while, but the thought of just living off their hard work felt off. It didn't sit right with me. So, I made up my mind to pull myself together. Wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. The whole idea of diving into the job market, of being truly on my own for the first time, was daunting. But the alternative? Living in a bubble, pretending I didn't need to grow up. That wasn't an option. Not anymore. Finding a job wasn't a walk in the park either. Ended up landing a gig as a manager at this trading company. The work was a whole new world for me, but I dug my heels in, determined to make it work. Gotta start somewhere, I told myself, over and over. I remember running into an old friend from school, Jake, while I was out grabbing lunch one day. He spotted me first. Hey, isn't that the homebird, Emily? Still living in your folks' nest? He teased, a smirk playing on his lips. His words stung, more than I wanted to admit. I squared my shoulders, facing him head-on. Actually, Jake, I'm managing on my own now. Got a job and everything. I shot back, the words laced with a mix of pride and defiance. Oh, look at you, all grown up and independent. Never thought I'd see the day. He laughed, but there was no real warmth in it. Yeah, well, people change. Things happen. You learn to stand on your own 2 feet, I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. The conversation felt like walking through a minefield, each word carefully chosen, but loaded. Jake shrugged, the conversation clearly not going the way he expected. Fair enough. Good for you, Emily. Really. We parted ways shortly after, the encounter leaving a sour taste in my mouth. It was a reminder of how far I'd come, sure, but also of how much further I had to go. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet of the house that used to be filled with my parents' laughter, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was fear, yeah, but also a budding sense of determination. I was on a path they'd never get to see, forging a new life from the remnants of the old. The chill in the air wasn't just from the December cold, it was my first holiday season without my folks. The Christmas sale crowd was a mix of frantic and festive, a sharp contrast to my own numb wandering. That's when I bumped into him, literally. Ouch. Watch it. I started, more out of surprise than pain. Sorry, my fault entirely, he replied, catching a box of Christmas ornaments before it hit the ground. This crowd is wild, huh? He was about my age, with a look of earnest concern that quickly changed to a sheepish grin. I'm Alex, he said, extending a hand not holding runaway Christmas decor. Emily, I responded, taking his hand briefly. Yeah, it's madness. Christmas shopping always turns into a contact sport. Alex laughed, and it was an easy, genuine sound. You're not wrong. I'm just trying to find something for my mom. She loves these handmade ornaments, but I'm clueless. Looking at the box he almost dropped, I picked one up. These are nice. Look, this one's got intricate designs. Bet she'd love it. We moved through the stalls together, talking about everything and nothing. Alex was easy to talk to, a breath of fresh air in the midst of holiday chaos. "So, Emily, what brings you here? Looking for anything in particular?" he asked, as we paused by a stall selling handmade scarves. "Just trying to feel, I don't know, festive, I guess?" "My parents, well, it's just me now. Holidays feel different," I confessed, surprised at my own honesty. Alex's expression softened. "I get that. Holidays, they can be tough. But hey, we find new ways to make them ours, right?" "Yeah, right," I agreed, finding comfort in his understanding. We ended up spending the afternoon together, finding gifts and sharing stories. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows between the stalls, Alex turned to me. "Hey, Emily, would you maybe want to grab a coffee? As a thank you for helping me survive this shopping ordeal and, well, for the company," he suggested, hopeful but clearly trying to play it cool. I thought about it. My instinct was to retreat, to go back to my quiet, solitary world. But something about Alex, his easy kindness, and his understanding, made me want to say yes. "Sure, Alex. I'd like that. Coffee sounds perfect," I replied, feeling a spark of something warm in the cold evening air. As we walked toward the nearest cafe, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would mark the beginning of something new. Not just surviving, but maybe starting to live again. A couple of months down the line, Alex decided it was high time I met his folks. I was a bundle of nerves, hoping to make a good impression. Their welcome was polite, but I could feel the chill through their smiles. We were barely through the door when the questioning started. It was like stepping into the ring, except I wasn't prepared for this kind of bout. "So, dear, Alex tells us you lost your parents recently. That must have been tough," his mom began, her tone soft but probing. "Yeah, it was a rough patch. Still is, sometimes," I admitted, fidgeting with the hem of my shirt. The conversation felt too personal, too soon. "And what about work? Alex mentioned you're in trading? How's that treating you?" His dad chimed in, his curiosity not quite matching the warmth supposed to accompany such questions. "It's going good. Keeps me on my toes," I responded, trying to keep the unease out of my voice. "Must be quite the lucrative field, eh? What kind of figures are we talking about?" His mom's question hit me like a cold splash, too forward, too soon. I glanced at Alex, hoping he'd throw me a lifeline. The look on my face must have said it all, because he quickly jumped in. "Mom, Dad, come on, let's not grill her about money." "That's not important," Alex said, his tone firm yet respectful. I could have hugged him right then. Despite his intervention, the evening carried an undercurrent of unease. After we left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't measured up to their expectations. In the car, the silence was heavy until I couldn't take it anymore. "Alex, do you think your parents didn't like me?" The words tumbled out, laced with worry. Alex took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Hey, don't worry about it. They're just protective, you know? Give it some time. They'll see how amazing you are, just like I do." His words were meant to comfort, and a part of me wanted to believe him. But the doubt lingered, a shadow on what should have been a straightforward step forward in our relationship. Settling into married life at my place was like a dream for the first 6 months. Me and Alex, we were in our little bubble of happiness. Sure, his mom, Mrs. Thompson, didn't exactly warm up to me, always poking at my cooking, my cleaning, even how I dressed. But since they lived a good drive away, those jabs were few and far between. We managed. Then one evening, Alex came home looking like he'd lost his best friend. "Babe, I've got to head out of town for work." 2 whole months, he said, barely meeting my eyes. My heart sank. 2 months? That's ages, Alex. What about us? He ran a hand through his hair, stress written all over his face. I know. It's the last thing I want, but I don't have a choice. And there's more, my mom's in the hospital. heart problems. Hearing that about Mrs. Thompson, despite our rocky relationship, I couldn't help but feel worried. "Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. Is she okay?" "They're not sure yet. She might need surgery," he replied, his voice cracking a bit. Without a second thought, I said, "I'll look after her while you're gone." "She'll need someone, right?" Alex looked at me, a mix of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "You'd do that? After everything?" I nodded. "Of course. She's your mom." The next day, I took a day off and headed to his parents' place. Mrs. Thompson was already home from the clinic, looking frail but stubborn as ever. "Emily, what are you doing here?" she asked, eyeing me like I might steal the silver. "I'm here to help out. Alex is worried about you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She huffed, settling back into her chair. "Well, I don't need babysitting, especially not by you." I bit back a sharper reply. "I know you don't. But I'm here to help, with cooking, cleaning, whatever you need." Mrs. Thompson squinted at me, as if trying to figure out my angle. "Fine. But I like my meals on time and my house spotless. And don't think you can dress like a slob here." I forced a smile. "Understood." Those weeks turned into a trial by fire. I cooked, cleaned, and did my best to keep things running smoothly, all under Mrs. Thompson's critical eye. Every dish I made was either too salty or too bland, every room I cleaned missed some speck of dust only she could see. One evening, as I was scrubbing the kitchen counter for what felt like the 10th time, she walked in, watching me like a hawk. "You missed a spot," she said, pointing to a corner so far back it would require me to grow an extra arm to reach it without moving everything off the counter. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm doing the best I can," I said, my patience wearing thin. She snorted. "Clearly, your best isn't good enough." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Alex was counting on me, and I wasn't about to let him down, no matter how much his mother pushed my buttons. "Is there anything else you need before I go to bed?" I asked, keeping my tone polite. "Just make sure you're up early to start breakfast. And try not to burn the eggs this time," she replied, turning on her heel and leaving me to my thoughts. Life at my in-laws became more of a boot camp than a recovery ward pretty fast. Every day, it was like waking up to a new list of demands from my mother-in-law. And every evening, I juggled my job and her endless requests that just piled up, one on top of the other. "Can you fetch me the remote?" "It's just there on the coffee table," Mrs. Thompson would say, pointing at an object mere inches from her hand. The first few times, I didn't mind. But then, it became a routine, her asking for things she clearly could get herself. Cooking dinner turned into a tactical mission, trying to remember all of her dietary whims. "I only eat organic greens, you know. And the chicken needs to be cooked just so," she'd instruct, her voice carrying that tone that said any deviation would be unacceptable. Evenings, the only time I could catch my breath, were hijacked by the blaring TV. Mr. Thompson had a thing for action movies, the louder, the better. There I was, exhausted, trying to find some peace, but instead, getting a front row seat to explosions and car chases. "You know, Emily, ever since you married my son, my health has just gone downhill," Mrs. Thompson threw at me one evening, out of nowhere. Her words stung, especially since I was bending over backward, trying to make her life easier. I tried to keep my cool, but it was getting tougher. "I'm really trying my best here, Mrs. Thompson. I don't see how my being with your son is causing your health issues." Her lips pursed into a thin line, clearly displeased. "Well, if you can't see it, I'm not sure how much help you are here." I was at my wit's end, dreaming of my own bed, my own kitchen, my sanctuary. But then, Alex called. "Babe, I'm so sorry, but I'm stuck here for another 2 months. The project's just not wrapping up as we expected." Hearing his voice, tired and strained, I wanted to be strong, to not add to his stress. "It's okay, Alex. We'll manage somehow," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Are you sure?" Mom's not giving you a hard time, is she? He asked, worry creeping into his voice. I paused, not wanting to worry him, but honesty won out. It's been challenging. But I'm handling it. Focus on your work, love. We'll sort this out when you get back. After hanging up, I realized this was my battle to fight, at least for now. Mrs. Thompson and her demands, the never-ending noise, the blame, it was all on me to bear. But I couldn't help but wonder, how much longer could I keep this up? The strain at home hit a peak when Mrs. Thompson had another heart scare and ended up needing surgery. It was serious enough that I called Alex in a panic, and he rushed back home. Seeing him was a relief, but it was short-lived because work pulled him away again. After the surgery, things at home didn't get any easier. Mrs. Thompson came back needing more care than before. It was like looking after a child. She wanted help with everything, eating, dressing, you name it. And Mr. Thompson? He was no help at all. Instead of appreciating the effort, he complained, "You're always out. I end up cooking for both of us. What are we, chopped liver?" Then, Mrs. Thompson started with her threats, saying she'd tell Alex I was neglecting her, hinting he should leave me. He'll listen to his mother. You'll see, she'd hiss, as if I wasn't already stretched to my limit. My patience was wearing thin, like an old pair of jeans about to tear at the seams. Mrs. Thompson's demands grew by the day, each one more unreasonable than the last. It felt like I was living in a pressure cooker, waiting for the whistle to blow. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Mrs. Thompson in the living room, a scowl set deep on her face. "Where have you been? I've been waiting for you to start dinner," she snapped as soon as I walked through the door. "I had to stay late at work, Mrs. Thompson. I'm sorry." "I'll start on dinner right away," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite my frustration. "And make sure it's edible this time." "Last night's dinner was a disaster," she retorted, turning her attention back to the TV, which was, as usual, blaring at an ear-splitting volume. I wanted to scream, to let out all the frustration and exhaustion I'd been bottling up inside. Instead, I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I began to prepare dinner. 2 weeks passed like that, and my obnoxious ward should have fully recovered by now. However, Mrs. Thompson remained weak. One day I got off work early. I was tiptoeing into the house, hoping for a quiet afternoon, but what I found was anything but. There was my mother-in-law, lively as can be, chattering away on the phone like she was at some high tea party. Yeah, I've got her wrapped around my finger. Just a little act here and there, and she jumps. Does everything for me. Even the little things I can do myself, she boasted to her friend, her laughter echoing off the walls. I stood there, frozen, key still in hand. The realization hit me like a truck. All this time, her needing help, her pain, a good chunk of it was just an act. A manipulative play to have me wait on her hand and foot. The anger bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. I stepped into the room, unable to hold back. Really, now? Is that how it is? Putting on a show so I do more for you? I confronted her, my voice hard, the words tumbling out. She turned, the phone still clutched to her ear, her face a mix of shock and guilt. For a moment, she looked like she was caught in the headlights, then, quick as a flash, her demeanor changed. "Oh, you're home. Look at the time," she said into the phone, brushing off our confrontation like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. This was a game changer. I realized then that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Not because I wasn't doing it right, but because the goalposts were always moving. "I can't believe you," I finally said, the disappointment heavy in my voice. "I've been breaking my back for you, and this is how you repay me? By lying? By manipulating?" Her response was cold, calculated. "I'm just making sure you're doing your part. After all, you married into this family. It's your duty." I didn't want to fight, but I couldn't let this go. "I've had it, Mrs. Thompson. I'm leaving this house," I said, my resolve hardening. Before I knew it, she was on her feet, fury in her steps as she snatched my phone from the kitchen counter. She stormed outside, and I followed, only to watch in disbelief as she threw it under the car, smashing it. "Let's see you call for help now," she sneered, her actions betraying her desperation. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, not just for the phone, but for the sheer breakdown of respect. I started gathering my things, determined to leave. But she wasn't done. She followed, throwing my clothes and personal items out after me, shouting insults that stung deeper than the cold air. "You're nothing. You don't deserve to be part of this family." I was outside, picking up my things, and trying to hold back tears when Alex arrived. The sight of his car was both a relief and a harbinger of the confrontation to come. "What's going on here?" Alex demanded, his eyes darting between his mother standing at the doorway and me, a mess on the driveway. "She's crazy, Alex. She's been lying about how sick she is. And now this." I gestured to the scattered belongings and my destroyed phone. His gaze shifted to his mother, searching for a denial that didn't come. "Mom? Is this true?" Mrs. Thompson's facade crumbled, but her defiance didn't. "She was never good enough for you, never good enough for our family." Walking into his parents' house, Alex was a storm dressed in human skin. His face was set, his jaw tight, ready to confront the hurricane his parents had brewed. "I can't believe what I've been hearing and seeing. How could you?" Alex started, his voice heavy with disappointment and anger. His mom, Mrs. Thompson, shot back. "Oh, now you're going to believe her over your own mother? She's turned you against us, filled your head with lies." "That's enough, Mom." Alex's voice cut through her accusations like a knife. "I've seen the videos. I've heard the recordings. I've heard enough of your words about her. There's no denying what you've done." The color drained from Mrs. Thompson's face as realization sank in. Her bravado faltered, her usual sharp tongue suddenly heavy in her mouth. "And you?" Alex turned to his father. "You just stood by? You let this happen?" Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, the guilt evident in his avoidance to meet his son's gaze. Alex continued, his disappointment unwavering. "Did you know that she sold her parents' house to pay for your wife's operation? Because the insurance wouldn't cover it all? We were planning to build a new house, a place where we could all live together. But not anymore." The room went silent, the weight of Alex's words pressing down on everyone. Mrs. Thompson, tears streaming down her face, reached out. "Please, I didn't know. I can change. We can forget all this happened." But Alex was resolute. "It's too late for that. You've shown us who you really are. We're done here. I'm done." Mr. Thompson, realizing the magnitude of their loss, turned to his wife with a look of betrayal. "You foolish woman. You've ruined everything." As Alex and I walked out to the car, the finality of the situation settled in. We were leaving behind more than just a house, we were severing ties with a part of our lives that had turned toxic. Sitting in the car, about to start a new chapter, Alex took my hand. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. But we're going to start fresh, just the two of us." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. "Together," I affirmed, squeezing his hand back. We drove off, leaving behind the chaos, ready to build a new life on our terms, grounded in truth and respect, away from the shadows of manipulation and deceit. A month flew by, and finally, our new house was ready, a real beauty, if I do say so myself. Me and Alex, we put our hearts into making it a home, picking out every piece with care, making sure it all felt like us. We hadn't spoken to his folks since that day. Heard through the grapevine that his dad up and left, found someone new, leaving Mrs. Thompson to fend for herself in some small apartment. She tried reaching out, wanted to patch things up, but for us, that ship had sailed. Some wounds are too deep for sorries to heal. One evening, as we settled into our new living room, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, Alex looked over at me with a smile that always made my heart skip. "So, babe, how do you feel about starting a family here?" he asked, his voice casual, but eyes filled with hope. I paused, the question hanging in the air like a promise. A baby, here, with you? That sounds like the dream, Alex. He reached for my hand, his touch grounding. I think we're ready to make new memories, good ones, in this place we built together. I nodded, the future suddenly blooming before us, filled with possibilities. It'll be amazing. Our own little family. Yeah, Alex agreed, a softness in his voice. Our own fresh start, away from all the drama. Just us and a new beginning. As we sat there, planning for a future filled with laughter and love, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. Despite the rocky road that led us here, we were building something beautiful on our own terms. The college campus was buzzing with the kind of energy that you can only find in a place overflowing with young dreams and ambitions. That's where I met Ethan. We were both gunning for the same scholarship, the kind that not only covered tuition, but also bragging rights. It was big, it was what every nerd in our batch was after. And boy, did we clash over it. Seriously, Ethan? You think you can outdo me on the thesis? Dream on. I'd scoff at him across the library, my eyes barely lifting from my laptop. He'd just grin, that annoyingly confident smirk that drove me nuts. Ava, I'll see you at the finish line. Better bring your A game. We were both stubborn as hell, each convinced we were the rightful winner of that grant. Our debates got so heated, sometimes I thought we'd end up setting the lecture halls on fire with our arguments. Your argument on the economic theories is so half-baked, I could serve it for breakfast, Ethan once told me during a mock debate. The class had erupted in laughter, and I could feel my cheeks burning, not just from embarrassment but from the raging fire to prove him wrong. Oh, please, your so-called innovative perspective is just recycled trash. Heard it all before, Ethan, I shot back, not missing a beat. It wasn't just about the scholarship, it was a battle of wits, pride, and, unbeknownst to us at the time, a budding attraction that neither of us wanted to admit. Our rivalry was the talk of the campus. We were always at each other's throats, challenging one another to do better, be smarter. But as the final decision on the grant neared, something shifted between us. Maybe it was the late-night study sessions that ended in shared coffee breaks, or the way we'd inadvertently learn more about each other's lives beyond the books. You know, for a smartass, you're not that bad, I found myself saying one night as we left the library together, the campus quiet around us. Ethan chuckled, shoving his hands in his pockets. Look who's talking. I've seen you help the freshmen with their assignments. Not the heartless competitor everyone thinks. It was strange, this new dynamic. Our banter softened, tinged with a reluctant respect that slowly melted into something warmer. When the day of the scholarship announcement came, we sat next to each other, an unspoken truce between us. May the best man, or woman, win, Ethan whispered, his hand brushing mine. I remember the rush of emotions when they called my name. But what stood out more was the genuine smile on Ethan's face. Guess you were the best man after all, he said, his laughter mingling with mine. From that day forward, our relationship took a new turn. We were still competitive, but it was different. We challenged each other to be better, supported each other's dreams. Our arguments turned into discussions, our banter into inside jokes. And somewhere along the line, we stopped being rivals and started being something more. Moving in together was the easiest decision we'd ever made. It felt like the natural next step, a testament to how far we'd come from those two hot-headed students who couldn't stand to be in the same room unless it was to argue over academic theories. Our friends were shocked. You too? Really? They'd ask, disbelief written all over their faces. Yeah, really, we'd say, exchanging looks that spoke volumes of the journey we'd been on. From rivals to roommates to, dare I say, soulmates. Living with Ethan was like being in our little bubble. But bubbles are delicate, and ours was no exception, especially when it came to dealing with his folks. Martha and John were as traditional as they come, and our choice to live together without the whole marriage shebang didn't sit well with them. Not at all. It was like a broken record every time we saw them. You're living in sin, Ava. It's not right, Martha would start, her tone laced with disappointment and a touch of scorn. She was a pro at guilt trips, making sure to sprinkle in stories of her own purity. John and I didn't even kiss until we were married. Can you imagine? I tried to keep my cool, respect was important to me, but boy, was it hard. Martha, times have changed. People don't wait for marriage to be together anymore. It's normal. Ethan stood by me, bless him, but it was like talking to a wall with them. John would chime in, voice heavy with this sense of betrayed values. We raised you better, Ethan. You're supposed to be a decent man, not swayed by this. That's what I was to them. Never Ava, always this, as if I were some bad influence instead of the person their son loved. Ethan tried to bridge the gap. Mom, Dad, I love Ava. We're happy. Can't you just be happy for us? But nope, it was like everything he said just bounced off them. Martha, with her knack for drama, would clutch at her pearls, literally. Happy? How can we be happy when you're living in sin? It's not right, Ethan. You know it's not. The worst part? Ethan was caught in the crossfire. His folks made it seem like I had him under some spell. You've changed, son. This isn't you, John would say, shaking his head like Ethan was some puppet gone rogue. And me? I was trying not to lose it. I respected their beliefs, sure, but the constant judgment was a drag. I told Ethan as much. I get where they're coming from, but I'm not the enemy here. We're just living our lives. I know, he'd sigh, looking like he was carrying the world on his shoulders. It's just, they're my parents. I wish they could see how good we are together. In the end, it felt like we were stuck in this loop. Us trying to live our lives, them seeing it as some personal affront. It was exhausting, dealing with the endless lectures and the not-so-subtle digs at our life choices. But what could we do? They were his parents, and no amount of reasoning seemed to make a dent. So we kept on, living our sinful life, hoping one day they'd come around. Or at least, stop making every dinner feel like a trial where we were always found guilty. Just when I thought Martha and John's nagging couldn't get any worse, they hit us with a new plan. You both need guidance, Martha announced one evening, her tone more determined than ever. We've arranged for you to meet with Father Mike. He'll set you straight. Ethan and I exchanged a look. The kind that said, "Are you kidding me?" without needing words. Mom, really? We don't need a priest to tell us how to live our lives. Ethan tried to reason, his patience wearing thin. But Martha was on a mission, and when Martha got going, there was no stopping her. It's not up for discussion, Ethan. You're going, and that's final. It's for your own good. So there we were, a few days later, sitting uncomfortably in Father Mike's office, a cozy little room filled with religious books and those cliché inspirational posters. Father Mike was a kind-looking man, but the situation was just absurd. Now, I understand there's some concern about your living arrangements? Father Mike began, peering over his glasses at us. I bit my tongue, really wanting to say something snarky, but managed to keep it civil. We're fine, really. It's just that Ethan's parents are a bit traditional. Father Mike nodded, as if this wasn't the first time he'd been dragged into a family squabble. Marriage is a sacred union, but so is love and respect for one another. Are you two committed to each other? Ethan took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Yes, we are. Completely. The priest smiled, then turned to some of his books, probably looking for some wise quote to throw at us. But before he could get into it, Ethan cut in. Look, Father, we appreciate what you're trying to do, but we're happy. Isn't that what matters? Father Mike looked at us, then, after a long pause, he closed his book. You're right. Happiness and commitment are what truly matter. Maybe it's not me who needs to guide you, but perhaps I can help your parents understand your choices. That meeting didn't magically fix everything, but it was a start. Or so we thought. Martha and John thanked Father Mike for his time, but seemed to ignore the whole happiness and commitment are what truly matter part. Instead, they focused on the sacred union bit. See? Even Father Mike agrees. You two need to get married, Martha insisted, completely missing the point. Ethan and I just looked at each other, the reality of the situation sinking in. No matter what we did, it seemed like his parents would never be satisfied. It was like banging our heads against a brick wall. Let's just get married and get it over with, I muttered to Ethan on our way home, half joking, but also half desperate for some peace. Ethan sighed, the weight of the world on his shoulders. I'll do anything if it means they'll finally leave us alone. Little did we know, that decision to give in would open a whole new can of worms. But at that moment, all we wanted was a break from the constant pressure. If a wedding was what it took, then so be it. The wedding was something straight out of a fairy tale, or so I thought. I pulled out all the stops to make sure it was an event that would make Martha and John happy, given their traditional views. The church was decked out in flowers, the music was solemn yet uplifting, and I was dressed in a gown that was the very definition of elegance. Even Martha, who could rival a statue when it came to showing emotions, shed a few tears during the ceremony. But, of course, there was a catch. My friends, who'd been my rock through this whole ordeal, came dressed to kill. They looked amazing, but apparently, their style was a bit too much for Martha. Did you see how they're dressed? She whispered to me, right in the middle of the reception. It's a wedding, not a nightclub. I could feel my cheeks burning, not sure if it was from anger or embarrassment. Martha, they're my friends. They're here to celebrate with us. Can we just focus on that? She clucked her tongue, shaking her head like I'd just failed the world's easiest test. I'm just saying. A little modesty wouldn't hurt. After we caved and got hitched, Martha and John must have thought they snagged an all-access pass to our place. No kidding, they started popping by every single day. If you ever needed a live demo of what too much looks like, this was it. One Saturday morning, there's a knock that could wake the dead. I'm talking 6 a.m., and these two are at our door like they're about to miss a flight. Ethan, barely awake, trudges to the door, and there they are, bright and chipper. Good morning. We thought we'd spend the day together. Martha chirps, pushing past Ethan like it's the most normal thing in the world. I'm in the kitchen, drowning my sorrows in coffee, when John starts critiquing my choice of breakfast. You know, a hearty breakfast is important. Is this even food? He's eyeballing my cereal like it's from another planet. Eggs and bacon were fine for you, right? I mutter under my breath, not in the mood to start my day off with a lecture on nutritional values. Then, Martha, bless her heart, decides to give me a rundown on cleanliness. Ava, dear, have you considered organizing your cupboards a bit more? And maybe using some coasters? Water rings on the table are such an eyesore. I'm biting my tongue so hard it's a miracle I still have it. Ethan sees me clenching my fists and jumps in. Mom, Dad, you know, we really appreciate your visits, but maybe we could do with a bit of space? You'd think he'd ask them to move to Mars by the looks on their faces. Space? But we're family. We just want to be close to you too, John says, utterly baffled by the concept of personal boundaries. Martha's on the verge of tears now, playing the guilt card like a pro. Do you not want us here? After everything we've done for you. It's like walking on eggshells. You try to set some ground rules, and suddenly you're the villain in their soap opera. I hit my breaking point on a Thursday evening, the kind that started with the same old surprise visit from Martha and John and ended with me locking myself in the bathroom, just to get a minute of peace. This has got to stop, I muttered to Ethan as we lay in bed, the moon casting a soft glow through our window. Your folks are driving me nuts. It's like we're living in a reality show, but there's no escaping the cameras. Ethan, looking as worn out as I felt, let out a long sigh. I know, babe. It's getting to me too. What do we do, though? They're my parents. But this is our home. We can't keep living like this, I shot back, my frustration bubbling over. We need space. Real space. Maybe we should move. Like, actually move. Ethan propped himself up on one elbow, eyeing me like I'd just suggested we join the circus. Move? Like, pack up everything and just go? Why not? I was half serious, half desperate. Your parents can't drop by if we're not here, right? The idea seemed radical, even to me, but the more we talked about it, the less crazy it seemed. We started to imagine a life where dinner wasn't interrupted by unannounced visits or our weekends weren't planned around avoiding his parents. Okay, let's say we do this. Where would we go? Ethan asked, the gears in his head turning. I don't know. Somewhere close enough to keep our jobs but far enough that it's not just a hop, skip, and a jump for your mom and dad, I suggested, warming to the idea. The decision felt right, almost liberating. We started house hunting online, looking for a place that could be our fresh start, far away from unannounced morning visits and constant criticism. It wasn't long before we found it, a cozy little house in a neighboring city. It was perfect, and the best part? I could buy it with the money I'd inherited from my grandmother. This wasn't just a new house, it was a statement. My money, my rules. A fresh slate on our terms. They're going to flip, Ethan said, dreading the conversation. Mom's going to think we're abandoning them. Maybe, I conceded, but we're not doing this to hurt them. We're doing it for us, for our sanity. They'll just have to understand. The conversation went as well as we'd feared. There were tears, accusations, and a lot of guilt being thrown around. But we stood our ground, knowing this was the right move for us. We did it, I said to Ethan as we signed the papers, the weight of the world lifting off our shoulders. The move was hectic, filled with boxes and goodbyes and the promise of peace. We kept our jobs, commuting a bit further than before, but every mile was worth it for the tranquility that greeted us at the end of the day. Our new life in the neighboring city was everything we'd hoped for. We fell back into our old rhythms, enjoying the quiet and the privacy we'd missed so much. The in-laws? We kept in touch through the internet, a safe buffer that allowed us to control the narrative and the visits. It was a compromise, but a necessary one. Our calls were polite, the conversations brief and infrequent, but it was enough to keep the peace. Just when Ethan and I thought we'd found our slice of peace in the new city, life decided to throw us a curveball. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where you just want to laze around and enjoy the calm. That's when the doorbell rang, shattering the silence. Who could that be? I murmured, not expecting anyone. We weren't exactly social butterflies, especially not here, not yet. Ethan shrugged, equally puzzled, and strolled over to the door. When he opened it, his puzzled look morphed into outright disbelief. There, on our doorstep, stood Martha and John, each with a suitcase bigger than the last time they'd criticized our breakfast choices. Surprise! Martha exclaimed, her smile wide enough to split her face. John just nodded, his usual taciturn self, but even he seemed to wear a small grin. What are? How did you? Why? Ethan's eloquence was gone, replaced by staccato confusion. We've decided to move in, Martha declared as if announcing they'd won the lottery. It's time we all lived together, as a family should. My mind raced. This had to be a joke, a very bad one. Move in? With us? I echoed, hoping I'd misunderstood. Yes, dear. We sold our house. We're here to stay, Martha said, pushing past Ethan, making herself at home as if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell on our doorstep. Ethan and I exchanged a look of sheer panic. You can't just decide to move in with us, I managed to say, finally finding his voice. Martha and John weren't just shocked at our refusal, they were outraged. You can't possibly expect us to leave. We're family, and this house, it's as much our son's as it is yours, Martha asserted, her voice a mix of indignation and disbelief. John, usually more reserved, joined in with a surprising fierceness. Exactly. Ethan's our son, and you're living here, thanks to him. You're just a freeloader, making decisions that aren't yours to make. I could barely contain my laughter, not because it was funny, but because of the sheer audacity. Ethan's face was a picture of shock, turning to me with wide eyes as if to say, "Are they serious?" "Hold on a minute," I said, still chuckling as I went to retrieve a folder from our home office. I flipped it open to a very important document, the deed to the house. I made sure they could see it clearly. "See this? This house was bought with the money I inherited from my grandmother. I am the sole owner. So, actually, it's entirely up to me who lives here. And you," I pointed squarely at Martha and John, "are not staying." Martha's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, while John's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. Ethan stepped beside me, a proud yet stern look on his face. "You heard her. Ava bought this house. Not me, not us, Ava. And we've decided together that moving in uninvited isn't an option." After I dropped the bombshell about owning the house, Martha tried to play her final card, all but declaring squatters' rights on account of Ethan living with me. "He's our son. We have every right to be wherever he is. We're family, and that means we stay together," she announced, puffing up like a peacock. I couldn't help it, a laugh escaped me, before I could clamp it down. This was it, the moment I'd been keeping close to the chest for just such an occasion. "Well, here's a fun fact for you," I said, the smile on my face growing wider by the second. "Ethan and I? We're not actually married. Not legally, anyway. The wedding was for show, to get you off our backs about living in sin." The look on Martha and John's faces? Priceless. Like they'd swallowed lemons whole. "What do you mean not married? That whole ceremony?" Martha's voice trailed off, her brain unable to compute. "Yep, a ceremony without the paperwork. So, technically, you're not my in-laws. And this," I gestured around, "is my house. Ethan's just living with me. My rules, my decision who stays and who goes." John's face went through 50 shades of red, anger, and embarrassment battling for dominance. "You can't just, that's not how things are done." Ethan stepped up then, his tone steady but firm. "Mom, Dad, I love Ava. And I'm tired, so tired, of the way you've treated us, her especially. We did what we had to live our lives on our terms. It's time you went home." Martha, not one to go down without a fight, turned her frustration into a weapon. "Ethan, you listen here. You're going to leave this woman and come with us. She's tricked you, manipulated you." But Ethan was unmovable, a rock in the storm. "No, Mom. I'm staying. With Ava. I love her, even if we're not married by your standards. It's my life, our life, and it's time you respected that." The standoff in our living room was tense, a silent battle of wills. But in the end, Martha and John had no choice but to leave, their departure a mix of rage and disbelief. As the door closed behind them, the silence that settled was profound, a mix of relief and the sobering realization of the bridge we'd just burned. Ethan and I looked at each other, a single thought between us: no matter what, we were in this together. After Martha and John huffed out of our place, tails between their legs, word got around through the grapevine that their big move was all a bluff. They never sold their house, it was just a ploy to muscle in on us, thinking they could pull one over and make themselves comfy at our expense. Can you believe that? The nerve of some people. But hey, here we are, still in our own little slice of heaven, shaking our heads at the whole mess. Can you imagine if they actually had sold their house? I said to Ethan one evening, the two of us sprawled out on the couch, enjoying the peace and quiet. Ethan chuckled, a deep, hearty sound that filled the room. That would have been a disaster. Good thing they're too attached to their precious home to actually go through with it. We got to talking about the future, just the two of us, figuring out where we go from here. So, what do you think about making it official, after if we're lucky enough to have a kid? Ethan asked, a bit hesitantly. I thought about it, turning the idea over in my mind. I guess. Might make things simpler, paperwork-wise. But I don't need a piece of paper to tell me I'm yours. Yes, I feel the same. It's just us, Ava. Always has been, always will be. Screw anyone who thinks they can dictate how we live our lives, Ethan said, his voice firm with conviction. It was settled then. We'd cross that bridge when we came to it, but for now, we were content. Just Ava and Ethan against the world, no legal documents needed to validate what we had. Our love was the real deal, stamps in the passports or not. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, that feeling of us against the world only grew stronger. We were a team, and nothing, not even sneaky in-laws with their bizarre schemes, could tear us apart. As for Martha and John, well, they kept their distance. Maybe they learned their lesson, maybe not. But one thing was for sure, Ethan and I were untouchable, living our lives on our own terms, in our own time. The future looked bright from where we were sitting, a blank canvas ready to be filled with love, laughter, and maybe, just maybe, the pitter-patter of tiny feet. But until then, we were just fine enjoying the peace, thankful for every quiet moment we had together in our little sanctuary. I'm Lena. My world used to be pretty decent, with my mom, Jane, being the cool optometrist in town and my dad, Richard, playing the hotshot plastic surgeon. Our house was always buzzing, either with mom's gentle guidance or dad's big tales of making people beautiful. Lena, pass those files, will ya? Mom would call out during her sessions at home. I loved being her sidekick, feeling kinda important in our little clinic world. Dad was another story. He'd breeze in, all charm and stories about his latest masterpiece surgeries. You know, beauty ain't just about what you see. Mom would hit back, trying to teach me something deeper. I didn't get all their jabs at each other, but I felt the chill in the air. Our dinners were a mix of medicine talk and Dad's bragging, till he started coming home late, the air thick with unsaid stuff. Late work again? Mom would dig, her voice sharp. Someone's gotta do the real work around here, Jane. Dad snapped one evening, colder than ever. Mom's face would tighten, but she kept her words locked up. Then, the storm hit. Dad had been messing around with his much younger assistant. The day he decided to bail, he packed up like he was just heading off to another conference, not leaving his whole life behind. Richard, how can you just walk out on us? Mom tried to fight, her voice all shaky. It's not you, it's me. Look after your mom, Lena, he said, barely glancing my way. His advice felt like a slap. Wasn't he supposed to be the one looking after us? What followed was a nightmare. Mom dove headfirst into a depression so bad, it felt like she'd vanished. We had to ditch our home for a cramped apartment, all cause Dad decided he wanted the house for himself and his new chick. Why's he doing this, Mom? I couldn't wrap my head around the mess. People change, Lena. Or maybe they just show their true colors. We'll get through, she whispered, but it was like talking to a ghost. She was out of it, barely holding on. We were sinking fast, and then came my grandparents, throwing us a lifeline with all the love and backup we needed. Your mom's stronger than she knows, Lena. We'll help her back on her feet, Grandpa would say, him and Grandma standing like two pillars by our side. They never trash-talked Dad, but the lesson was clear, family's what you have when the world turns its back. Then came the final blow. Dad wanted the house, all for himself and his new family. Mom was too beaten down to fight, nearly letting him have it all. But then, my grandparents stepped in, guns blazing. They hired a lawyer who fought tooth and nail, managing to claw back half the house's value. That house got sold, and with that money, Mom could afford a small apartment for us. Life took a nosedive after Dad bolted. Mom, once vibrant and full of life, became a shell of herself. Our new digs? A cramped apartment that felt more like a box than a home. The shift from our comfortable life to this was like night to day, and not in a good way. Mom's clinic work dried up. She'd stare at the phone as if willing it to ring, but it sat silent, a mocking reminder of how far we'd fallen. The days she managed to drag herself to the clinic were victories, but they were few and far between. Lena, breakfast. She'd call out on her good days, her voice lacking its usual warmth. I knew those days. It meant she was trying, for me. I'd shuffle into the kitchen, finding her staring out the window, coffee untouched. "You okay, Mom?" I'd ask, even though I knew the answer. "I'm fine, honey. Just tired," she'd lie, plastering on a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. School became my escape. It was there I could pretend everything was normal, that my family wasn't crumbling. But kids talk, and it wasn't long before whispers of my dad's affair and our fall from grace reached my ears. "Hey, Lena, heard your dad left 'cause he got tired of your mom. That true?" Jack, a kid with too much mouth and too little sense, sneered one day. "Shut it, Jack. You don't know anything," I'd snap back, fists clenched. I learned to fight with words, my tongue as sharp as any knife. At home, the silence was deafening. Mom and we were like two ghosts, passing each other in a fog of sadness. But then, Grandma and Grandpa stepped in. They were our rock, refusing to let us sink further. "Jane, you can't let this beat you. You're stronger than this," Grandpa would say, his voice firm yet filled with concern. "I know, Dad. It's just hard," Mom would respond, her voice a whisper, her spirit broken. "Hard? Life's always hard. It's about getting up, dusting yourself off, and going again. Lena needs you," Grandma would chime in, no nonsense as ever. Their visits brought light into our dim world. They helped with bills, groceries, and most of all, they brought hope. Hope that things could get better, that we weren't alone. "Lena, why don't you help me with this?" Grandma would say, handing me a recipe. Cooking became our therapy, a way to bridge the gap the silence had created. I watched Mom slowly, ever so slowly, start to come back to life. She began seeing patients again, her clinic's phone starting to ring with life. It was a slow climb, but we were making it, step by step. "You think you can handle school and helping me at the clinic?" Mom asked one day, her eyes holding a spark I hadn't seen in ages. "Yeah, Mom, I can. Let's do this," I said, my voice more confident than I felt. But I was ready to fight, ready to help us move forward. The struggles were real, but they made us stronger. The betrayal, the hurt, it was all part of our story, but it wasn't the end. It was just a chapter, one that taught us about resilience, about fighting back when life knocks you down. Then my grandparents died quietly one after the other. They left us a legacy, a bittersweet gift that propelled us into a new chapter. With it, Mom found the strength to open her own ophthalmology clinic. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of our past. "I'm thinking of naming it Visionary Futures," Mom announced one evening, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Sounds like a superhero base, not an eye clinic," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Mom chuckled, shaking her head. "Maybe so, but it's about looking ahead, Lena. We're moving forward, not looking back." I helped set up the clinic, painting walls, assembling furniture, and sorting through endless boxes of medical supplies. It was hard work, but there was a sense of hope and purpose in the air that had been missing for too long. "Lena, can you help me with this?" Mom called out from the reception area. I walked over to find her struggling with the computer system we'd installed. "Let me try," I said, taking over the keyboard. "You know, for a tech-savvy generation, I'm pretty useless at this stuff." "You're doing better than me." "I still miss paper records," Mom replied with a sigh. The clinic slowly started to take shape, becoming more than just a building. It became a symbol of our resilience. We were both learning and growing, finding our footing in this new reality. Opening day arrived faster than we anticipated. Mom was a bundle of nerves, double-checking everything and pacing the floor of the clinic. "What if no one shows up? What if we fail?" she whispered to me, her usual confidence wavering. "We won't," I said firmly, more to reassure myself than her. "You're the best eye doc in town. People will come." And come they did. The clinic was busier than we ever imagined, with patients praising Mom's expertise and the warm, welcoming environment we'd created. It felt like we were finally turning a page, leaving the shadow of Dad's betrayal behind us. In the midst of all this, I started to find my own place in the clinic. I wasn't just the daughter of the owner, I was a part of the team, helping patients and learning more about ophthalmology than I ever thought possible. "Lena, you have a real knack for this," Mom said one day, watching me interact with a particularly difficult patient. "Have you ever thought about going into medicine yourself?" I shrugged, unsure. The thought had crossed my mind, but it felt like a huge step. Maybe. I like helping people, and working here has been eye-opening, no pun intended. Mom laughed, pulling me into a hug. "Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. We've come a long way, haven't we?" "Yeah, we have," I agreed, looking around the busy clinic. "We really have." As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the clinic thrived. We were no longer just surviving, we were living. It wasn't always easy, and the shadow of the past sometimes loomed over us, but we faced each challenge together, stronger and more united than ever. After high school, I had this crossroads moment, you know? Mom sat me down one evening, her clinic files spread out like a sea around us. "Lena," she started, that serious tone in her voice that always made me listen up. "Have you given any thought to becoming an optometrist? You've got the brains and the heart for it." Honestly, I had tossed the idea around in my mind, playing with it like a puzzle piece, trying to find where it fit in my future. "Yeah, I've thought about it, Mom. It's just big, you know? Following in your footsteps." She smiled, that warm, reassuring smile that could light up our cramped living room. "Big, yes, but not impossible. You've been my right hand here since you could barely reach the counter. You've got this, Lena." So, I took the leap. I enrolled in medical college, diving headfirst into the world of medicine. Those years were a blur of textbooks, late-night study sessions, and more coffee than I care to admit. But I made it through, graduating with a sense of accomplishment that was both mine and a tribute to the path Mom had paved for me. I interned at her clinic, getting hands-on with everything from patient consultations to managing the inventory of lenses and frames. It was during this time I continued my medical education, never letting the dream of expanding our clinic fade into the background. Then came the International Ophthalmology Exhibition in our city. It was a big deal, and Mom had been buzzing about it for weeks. "Lena, this could be a game changer for us," she'd said, her eyes sparkling with that familiar mix of excitement and determination. And she was right, but not just about the clinic. At the exhibition, I met Alex. He was there representing a major pharmaceutical company, and from the moment I saw him, it felt like someone had punched the air out of me. He had this easy charm, a smile that felt like it was just for me, and eyes that listened. We got to talking, first about the boring stuff, supply contracts, new drugs on the market, the usual. But then, the conversation drifted. He asked about my work at the clinic, about what it was like growing up in a family so dedicated to healthcare. "You really love it, huh?" "The clinic, I mean," he said, leaning in, genuinely interested. "Yeah, I do. It's more than just a job, you know? It's part of who I am," I replied, surprised at how easy it was to open up to him. He nodded, that smile never leaving his face. "I get that. It's the same for me. Passion drives us." Things moved fast after that. Alex started showing up at the clinic, under the pretense of official pharmaceutical business, but we both knew it was more. He'd bring coffee, we'd steal moments between patients to chat, and before I knew it, I was falling hard. One day, after the clinic had closed and we were alone, he turned to me, took my hands in his, and said, "Lena, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you." My heart raced, my stomach did somersaults, and all I could manage was a whispered, "I love you, too." He smiled, that now familiar smile that promised so much more. Then, "Lena, will you marry me?" It was sudden, but then, the best things in life usually are. "Yes," I said, no hesitation. Yes, I will. The excitement of the engagement consumed us. We dove into wedding planning, our days filled with talk of dates, venues, and dresses. Life at the clinic was usually a calm sea, the kind you'd want after a storm's passed. That day, though, it felt like the storm decided to make a U-turn. I was sitting behind the reception desk, scrolling through wedding dresses on the clinic's computer, dreaming, planning. That's when the door banged open, like trouble decided to walk in on two legs, dressed in expensive clothes that screamed louder than their voices. The couple, a man and a woman, strolled in like they owned the place, eyeballing everything with a mix of disdain and superiority. The man, about 60, with an air that he breathed better air than the rest of us, was the first to break the silence. "Hey, we need to see the doc, pronto. Got no appointment, but tell her it's urgent," he barked, his voice grating against my already fraying patience. I plastered on my professional smile, the one Mom taught me for just such occasions. "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked for the next 2 weeks. I can take your number and call you if there's a cancellation?" His reaction was like I slapped him with the schedule. "What? You can't squeeze in a real doctor? Do you even know who I am?" Before I could muster a response that wouldn't get me fired, his gaze landed on my computer screen. The smirk that crawled up his face was enough to make my skin crawl. "Looking at wedding dresses on the job? And look at you, thinking someone would marry that?" I felt my cheeks burn, not from embarrassment but pure, boiling anger. "Excuse me, but my personal time is none of your business. Now, if you don't have an appointment, I must ask you to leave." His laughter was like sandpaper to my ears. "This is how you treat people here? No wonder this place looks like a dump. And you, girl, ever thought of visiting a plastic surgeon? That nose and those lips could use some work." I was about to launch myself over the desk and show him exactly what this girl could do when Mom came out. Her timing was always either perfect or disastrous, depending on how you looked at it. Her eyes widened in shock. "Richard?" The atmosphere turned electric. Richard, the illustrious father who'd taken a hike from our lives, looked like he'd just swallowed a bug. "And who might you be?" His voice was laced with feigned ignorance, but the venom was palpable. Mom's backbone turned to steel. "The mother of the girl you've just insulted," she shot back, her tone slicing through the tension like a scalpel. His companion, a walking advertisement for plastic perfection, piped up. "Let's go, honey. This place isn't worth our time." That's when Mom turned to me, her voice loud enough to cut through the standoff. "Lena, this piece of work is your biological father. Be thankful he left. We're better off without his delightful company." The man, my so-called father, Richard, recoiled as if Mom's words were physical blows. His arrogance deflated slightly, revealing a flicker of something else. Was it guilt? Or just surprise at being confronted so directly? "You can't talk to me like that, Jane. I've achieved things you wouldn't even dream of," he shot back, trying to recover his earlier bravado. Mom snorted. "Achieved? Destroying families? Abandoning your daughter? If those are achievements, then yes, you're quite successful." The room felt too small for the growing tension. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching this surreal exchange between my parents. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away, but you just can't. Just when I thought the drama couldn't crank up any higher, Dad brushed off Mom's words like they were just pesky flies and doubled down. "Look, just get the owner. My time's precious, and I'm not about to let your little clinic's reputation tank because you can't recognize importance when it's staring you in the face." Mom stood her ground, her voice calm but laced with steel. "The owner? You're looking at her. And Lena here, she's not just my daughter. She's the co-owner and the future of this clinic." The look on Dad's and his new wife's faces? Priceless. Like someone had slapped them with a reality stick. Then Alex, my fiancé, sauntered in, quiet as a cat but with a presence that filled the room. Mom wasn't done, though. She launched into Dad like a missile. You left us for your assistant, stole our money, and made life a misery. But look at us now. We're standing strong, and frankly, I thank God we're rid of a nobody like you. Dad tried to puff himself up, all indignant like. Changed my mind about this place. Got my own clinic with top-notch specialists. Just needed a quick consult while on the road, that's all. That's when Alex, bless him, chimed in. Your clinic? Aren't you the same guy who botched that surgery on the Hollywood star? Got your license yanked and left drowning in lawsuits? You could practically see the steam coming off Dad. His face went from red to ghost white. That's all lies. I'm well respected in my field. Alex didn't skip a beat. Respected? The only thing you're leading in is the race to the bottom. Bankrupt, tangled in legal troubles, and now this pathetic show? Not much of a legacy. Dad just soaked it all in, face getting redder with every word, until he couldn't take it anymore. That's a load of bull. He exploded, his voice cracking under the pressure. I'm a legend in plastic surgery. My hands work magic. He gestured dramatically towards his wife, as if she was his masterpiece exhibit. Mom, Alex, and I couldn't help but take a good look at her, and, well, let's just say it wasn't a pretty sight. The work he'd done was questionable at best. Seeing our reactions, Dad's wife lost it. She hurled insults at him like grenades, her voice sharp and cutting. Bad doctor. Bankrupt. You're a disgrace. And with that, she stormed out, leaving a silence that echoed off the clinic walls. Dad, now alone and looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, slunk off after her without another word. It was like watching the end of a sad, twisted play. After my dad and his wife made their less than graceful exit, the clinic felt lighter somehow, like we'd just aired out a room that had been closed off for too long. Mom and I shared a look, a mix of relief and disbelief. Alex stood by the reception, a silent but solid support system. Can you believe that just happened? I broke the silence, still reeling from the encounter. Mom let out a laugh, the tension in her shoulders easing. Believe it? I lived it. And honestly, Lena, I'm just glad it's over. Alex came over, putting an arm around me. You both handled that brilliantly. If that was me, I don't think I could have kept my cool. I smiled, leaning into him. We've had a bit of practice dealing with difficult patients, but he's on another level. Yeah, well, he's gone now. And from what I've seen, he won't be back anytime soon, Alex added, ever the optimist. Mom nodded, her gaze thoughtful. It's strange. For so long, the thought of facing him seemed like the ultimate showdown. Now that it's happened, it feels like, I don't know, like closing a book I've been reading for too long. That's because we're on to the next chapter, I said, feeling a surge of hope. And this time, we're writing it on our terms. As the day wound down, I found myself staring at the door Dad had walked out of. It was just a door, but it felt symbolic, like the barrier between our past and our future. Thinking about locking that door and throwing away the key? Alex joked, coming up beside me. Something like that, I admitted. But more about all the doors that are still open for us. Mom joined us, her arm linking with mine. He may have left a shadow here once, but we're the ones who choose what fills this place now. Love, care, and a whole lot of hard work. Yeah, and a no jerks allowed policy, I added, earning a chuckle from both of them. As we locked up the clinic that evening, the sunset painted the sky in hues of hope and promise. The departure of shadows wasn't just about Dad leaving, it was about us stepping out from under the weight of his influence, ready to face the light of a new day. A few months down the line, the wedding bells were ringing. Me and Alex tied the knot in this cozy little ceremony. Just a bunch of our relatives and close friends, the kind of people who'd been there through thick and thin. Dad? He was nowhere in sight, which suited me just fine. The day was perfect without his shadow looming over us. Chatting with some of the docs we knew, the gossip mills were churning. Turns out Dad had crashed and burned, big time. Debts up to his eyeballs and his last bit of property snatched away to cover some of them. And the cherry on top? A lineup of angry patients with botched jobs ready to take him to court. Karma's a real kicker, ain't it? So, he's really tanked, huh? I said to Mom over coffee one morning, trying not to sound too smug about it. Mom sighed, her eyes a mix of relief and something a bit softer, maybe pity. Seems like it, Lena. But let's not dwell on it. We've got our own lives to live. Yeah, you're right, I replied, feeling a twinge of, I don't know, something. Not exactly sadness, but close. It's just crazy, you know? After everything. Alex, ever the voice of reason, chimed in. Life's about moving forward, not looking back at the debris. We've got a lot to be thankful for. He was right, as usual. The wedding was a blast, a real celebration of new beginnings. And with Dad's drama finally in the rearview, it felt like we could breathe again, really breathe. Our little family's got a bright future ahead, Mom said, her hand finding mine. Let's focus on that. And that's exactly what we did. The clinic thrived, our marriage was full of love and laughter, and the shadow of Dad's legacy faded into nothing more than a bad memory. We were building something new, something ours, and nothing could drag us down. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The hardships, the battles, they made us who we are. And standing there, with my mom and Alex by my side, I knew we were unbreakable. The past was just that, the past. Our eyes were set on the horizon, eager for the dawn of our new day. Born into a world where my last name opens more doors than I care to walk through, you could say I had it all laid out for me. My dad's the big boss of a company you've probably seen tick across the stock exchange screen more times than you've cursed the morning alarm. Yes, that kind of rich. But if you're expecting tales of a golden girl, draped in designer and sipping champagne for breakfast, you've got the wrong story. Me? I've always kept it real, feet firmly on the ground. Money's nice, sure, but it's not everything. I chose a different path, one that's led me to places money can't buy and experiences no gold card can fetch. Charity work, helping those in need, and living a life that's, well, ordinary. That's me, Jessica. Not the heiress, just Jessica. So, I was stuck in one of those typical evenings where my friend Sarah decided we all needed to get out more. We ended up at this dive bar downtown, the kind where the beer's cheap and the lights are dim enough to hide your regrets. Sarah was all hyped up, going on about some guy she met online. You've gotta meet him, Jess. He's totally your type, she kept saying. My type? Since when did she decide she knew my type? Anyway, we're there, and in walks this guy. Not Sarah's online prince, but another dude, Alex. He was there with some friends, looking as out of place as a cat at a dog show. He wasn't dressed to impress, just a simple tee, jeans, and this easy smile that kind of lit up the room. We got to talking, and it was easy. Like, really easy. He worked some manager job at a place I'd never heard of, nothing fancy, but he talked about it with this passion that was kinda infectious. You really dig your job, huh? I remember asking, sipping on my third beer. Absolutely, Alex shot back, leaning in. Every day's a challenge. But hey, I'm not here to bore you with work talk. What about you? Sarah mentioned charity work? I shrugged, trying to downplay it. Yes, a bit of this and that. Just trying to do my bit, you know? That's cool. Really cool, he said, and I could tell he meant it. Not in a trying to impress you sort of way, but genuinely. The night rolled on, our group mingling, but Alex and I kind of stuck together, chatting about everything and nothing. It was refreshing, talking to someone who wasn't trying to sell me on some investment or brag about their latest acquisition. As the night was winding down, Alex got this look in his eye, like he was working up to something. Hey, Jessica, I know this is kind of forward, but would you want to grab dinner with me sometime? Just us? I remember feeling this mix of surprise and excitement. Sure. I said, trying to sound cool about it. I'd like that. On the way home, Sarah was all giggles and I told you so's. I just smiled, thinking about the evening. Alex was a breath of fresh air in my often too stale world. Little did I know how much things were about to change. It wasn't long before going out turned into hanging out at each other's places, which, let's be real, mostly meant my cozy apartment because Alex's roommates were a circus and a half. One evening, sprawled on the couch after devouring what might be the world's most average takeout pizza, Alex turned to me, his eyes serious, but his tone light. "Jessica, how do you feel about making this a more permanent arrangement?" he asked, crumbs still clinging to the corner of his mouth. I raised an eyebrow. "You proposing we split a Netflix account or something more along the lines of Elise?" He chuckled, brushing off the crumbs. "Well, I was thinking more like a life together. But hey, we can start with Netflix." The simplicity of it, the straightforwardness, no grand gestures or dramatic backdrops, just us, in our element. It felt right. "Alex, if you're asking what I think you're asking. Yes. 1,000 times, yes." And just like that, with the aroma of cheap pizza as our witness, we decided to tie the knot. It was swift, sure, but when you know, you know. Telling our families was the next hurdle. My folks, well, they've always been about the "as long as you're happy" mantra, but this was putting it to the test. Dad, with his business empire, and Mom, the socialite, they had visions of me settling down with someone more in our circle. I broke the news over dinner, the fancy kind, where you're not sure which fork to use for the salad. "Mom, Dad, I'm getting married to Alex," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Dad paused, fork midair. "Alex? The manager chap? Well, that's quick." Mom simply smiled, a bit too tightly. "Dear, are you sure? This is rather sudden, isn't it?" But I was firm. "Yes, I'm sure. He's amazing, and we're really happy together." Their skepticism was palpable, but so was their love. "Well, if he makes you happy, darling," Mom conceded, and Dad nodded in agreement. Alex's folks were a whole different ball game. We went over to their place, a cozy little house that seemed always to smell like fresh cookies or something equally comforting. Judy and Martin, they were as down-to-earth as they come, and they welcomed me like I'd always been a part of the family. "Alex tells us you're setting a date?" Martin asked, passing me a plate of those infamous cookies. "Yes, we're thinking sooner rather than later. Small ceremony, nothing fancy," I replied, trying to gauge their reaction. Judy beamed. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. We're just thrilled for you both." Their warmth was enveloping, a stark contrast to the cautious optimism of my own parents. It was clear, right from the get-go, that our worlds were different, but the common ground was the genuine happiness for me and Alex. Planning the wedding, we were on the same page: keep it simple, keep it us. A small ceremony, close friends and family, and an open bar because, as Alex put it, if we're doing this, we're making sure everyone's having a good time. And that's how it went down. A swift engagement, not because we were rushing, but because everything just clicked into place. Amid the whirlwind, there were quiet moments, looks shared between us that said, "We're doing the right thing." And we really were. Living with Alex started off as everything I'd hoped for and more. We were like two peas in a pod, making our little corner of the world in that cozy, modern apartment I had rented. It was ours, filled with love, laughter, and a ton of takeout containers, because, let's face it, neither of us were winning any awards in the kitchen. It wasn't long before I started noticing how Alex's parents, Judy and Martin, had this way of dropping hints about things they liked or needed whenever they came over. At first, it was subtle, almost cute. "Oh, Jessica, that's a lovely coffee maker. Must make mornings a breeze," Judy would say, eyeing our shiny new appliance with a gleam in her eye. Or Martin, "This sofa is just divine. Our old one's been giving me a right pain in the back, you know." Wanting to be the good daughter-in-law, I'd surprise them with gifts here and there. A coffee maker for Judy, a comfortable new sofa for their living room, and so on. Their initial reactions were always the same, a mix of surprise and a little bit of guilt. "Oh, Jessica, you shouldn't have. This is too much," Judy would exclaim, her hands fluttering to her chest. "But, you know, humans are funny creatures. Give them an inch, and they'll take a mile." Those initial protests faded away, replaced by a growing list of subtle hints that were about as subtle as a brick through a window. "Dinner at your folks' place was lovely, dear. Did you see that new TV they have? Crystal clear. Ours is practically ancient." Alex would relay his parents' latest comments, oblivious to the change in their tone. One evening, after I'd just dropped a not-so-small fortune on a fancy new TV for them, Alex and I were curled up on the couch, my head resting in his lap. "They really loved the TV, babe. You're amazing, you know that," he said, his fingers running through my hair. I sighed, the weight of their expectations starting to press down on me. "Alex, do they expect us to keep doing this? It's getting a bit much, don't you think?" He paused, his hand stopping mid-stroke. "What do you mean? They're just happy, that's all." "Happy or taking advantage?" I pushed back, sitting up to look at him. "It feels like we're their personal shopping service." Alex was taken aback, his brow furrowing. "They're not like that, Jess. They're just not used to nice things, that's all." "But where does it end, Alex?" "It's like they've got a taste for it now, and they're not looking back," I argued, frustration creeping into my voice. The conversation ended with an uneasy truce, but it was clear we were on different pages. Judy and Martin's gratitude had morphed into entitlement, and it was putting a strain on me. I loved Alex, but I wasn't about to become a bottomless ATM for his parents. When my dad's company hit the skids, it felt like the rug was yanked out from under my feet. That cushy life? Poof, gone. And with it, the whole dynamic of my relationship took a nosedive. The shift wasn't gradual, it was like flipping a switch from daylight to darkness. I had to break the news to Alex and his folks, and let me tell you, that was a conversation I'd been dreading. "Listen up, things are gonna get tight. Dad's company's tanking, and well, we're in for a rough ride," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the tremor was there, betraying my nerves. Alex's reaction was a gut punch. "You're kidding me, right? What do you mean things are gonna get tight? You're telling me we can't live like we used to because of your dad's mess?" His words were like ice, and for a second, I wished the floor would swallow me whole. Judy and Martin's faces were no better, their disappointment barely masked. "This is quite the situation you put us in, Jessica," Martin added, his tone dripping with reproach. And just like that, the warmth and camaraderie we once shared evaporated, replaced by this cold expectation that somehow, I was to blame for my family's financial downturn. Moving in with them was hell dressed up as a temporary solution. Our once independent life got swapped for a guest room that felt more like a cell in the house of the two people who clearly saw us as a nuisance. The atmosphere was charged with tension, every day a reminder that I'd somehow failed them. "We're cutting back on everything because of this," Judy would remind me, her voice sharp, as she served dinner that was a far cry from the lavish meals we used to enjoy. And Martin, always with a comment on saving costs. "Make sure those lights are off. We're not running a charity here." But Alex, he was the hardest to bear. The man I married seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who saw me as a letdown. "Can't you do something? Talk to your dad? It's like you don't even care we're living like this," he'd snap, anger flaring over the smallest things. Our conversations, once easy and filled with future plans, now were minefields. Every word I said was a potential trigger for another outburst. "I thought marrying you meant security, not this struggle," he'd throw at me during arguments, his words slicing through me. It was clear we weren't just dealing with financial stress. This was a test of our relationship, a revelation of true colors under pressure. I was stuck in the middle, battling the disillusionment from my husband and his parents, while grappling with my own sense of failure. Judy's birthday dinner was supposed to be this cozy family thing at some upscale restaurant, a break from the constant tension. But it turned into the showdown of a lifetime. I should have seen it coming, the way things had been going at their place. We're all sitting there, menu in hand, and I'm trying to keep the peace, just blend into the background. That plan got torpedoed the second orders started flying. Alex, with this grin that made my skin crawl, goes, "Let's get the steak and the lobster for us," and he throws a look my way, 1 part smug, 2 parts cruel. Jessica can do with the soup of the day. Gotta save where we can, right? They all laugh like it's the best joke they've heard in ages. Judy adds her 2 cents. "Absolutely, can't have Jessica overspending now, can we?" I felt this flush of heat, not embarrassment, but pure fury. "Really? Soup? What's this, some kind of sick joke?" I snapped back, my voice sharper than I intended. "Oh, come on, Jessica. It's just a bit of fun," Alex said, that smirk still plastered on his face. That's when I lost it. "Fun? This is your idea of fun? When the chips are down, you just show how petty you really are. I can't believe I fell for your act." You could hear a pin drop. The whole restaurant was watching now, the awkwardness off the charts. I didn't sit back down. "Keep your fancy dishes, and your pathetic jokes. I'm out," I said, standing up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. The noise echoed, turning more heads our way. Alex reached out, trying to play the peacemaker. "Jessica, don't. Let's not make this a scene." "A scene? You think I care about making a scene after that stunt? This is about respect, something you clearly have none of." I yanked my arm free and made for the exit, the weight of their stares on my back. Stepping out into the night felt like breaking out of prison. My phone was blowing up, Alex no doubt, trying to do damage control. I ignored it, my mind made up. I drove back to their place, a storm of emotions brewing inside. How had things gone so sour? Alex and I were a team, or so I thought. But that dinner? It was a slap in the face, a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. Back at the house, I packed my bags in record time, each folded shirt a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. It wasn't just about leaving a place, it was about leaving a relationship that had shown its true colors. I turned off my phone, cutting off the barrage of messages. The silence was eerie, but welcome. That night wasn't just the end of a disastrous dinner, it was the close of a chapter one had no interest in revisiting. After the disaster that was Judy's birthday dinner, I found myself driving to my parents' house. The night was quiet, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. By the time I pulled up to their driveway, my decision was made. I needed sanctuary, yes, but more than that, I needed advice, something only my dad could offer. Walking into the house, the familiarity of it all was both comforting and jarring. Mom was asleep, but Dad was up, sitting in his study, surrounded by papers that seemed less important the moment I stepped in. "Jessica? What are you doing here at this hour? Is everything okay?" He stood up, concern etching his face. I took a deep breath, the events of the evening pouring out of me in a flood. I told him about the dinner, about Alex and his parents, and how I felt like I'd been reduced to nothing but a source of income for them. Dad listened in silence, his expression hardening with every word. When I finished, he sighed, a sound that carried years of experience and a hint of sorrow. "Jessica, I saw this coming. I just hoped I was wrong," he finally said, his voice steady but filled with empathy. "How could I have been so blind, Dad?" "I thought Alex. I thought we were different," I said, feeling the weight of my naivety. He walked over, putting an arm around my shoulders. "You wanted to see the best in him, in them. There's no fault in that. But people show their true colors in tough times. It's a hard lesson, but an important one." I nodded, the reality of his words sinking in. "But what do I do now? I can't go back there." "You'll stay here, for starters. As for the rest, we'll figure it out together," he assured me, his confidence a balm to my frayed nerves. Then, he shared something that took me by surprise. "You know, the company's situation isn't as dire as it seems. We're actually on the verge of a breakthrough. It was a strategic move, a way to weed out the opportunists. I stared at him, stunned. So, you mean to say we're not broke? He chuckled, a sound that was part relief, part amusement. Far from it. But it was important to see who would stick around when the chips were down. Unfortunately, Alex and his family showed their true selves. The revelation was a lot to process. My anger towards Alex and his parents was now mixed with a sense of vindication. They had revealed their true motives, and in doing so, had freed me from a future of manipulation and deceit. Dad, I don't know whether to be relieved or furious, I admitted, the emotions battling inside me. Be both. It's okay. But remember, this experience has taught you something invaluable about people and their intentions. Use it, learn from it, he advised, his words grounding me. Walking up to Judy and Martin's house the next day felt like heading into the lion's den. I was ready for a showdown, but nothing could have prepared me for the cold reception I got. Alex was standing there, divorce papers in hand, with a look that could only be described as triumphant disdain. Here you go. Let's get this over with, he said, practically shoving the papers at me. His parents were hovering behind, barely containing their glee. Finally getting rid of the freeloader. Judy snickered, and Martin nodded in agreement, a smug smile plastered across his face. Alex joined in. Yes, turns out you're just an ordinary dummy without your daddy's money. Thought you'd cry, but guess what? We don't need a tearful mess around here. Their words stung, but not in the way they expected. I felt a bizarre mix of anger and liberation. I looked at the papers, then at them, and without a word, signed where I needed to. As I did, their smiles widened, thinking they'd won. But I had the last laugh. Pulling out a newspaper from my bag, I slapped it down on the table with more force than necessary. Thought you might find this interesting, I said, my voice dripping with unrestrained satisfaction. The headline screamed about my dad's company making a monumental comeback, profits soaring higher than ever. Watching their faces drain of color was a sight I'd pay to see again. Judy and Martin's smugness vanished, replaced by shock, then desperation. Alex's arrogance crumbled, leaving him looking like a child who'd just lost his favorite toy. Judy suddenly switched gears, stepping towards me with arms wide open. Oh, my sweet girl, it's all a big misunderstanding. Let's hug it out. Martin, ever the opportunist, chimed in. Let's not rush things. Sit down, have a coffee, and we can talk this through. And Alex, oh, Alex, he was the picture of regret. I was wrong, okay? We can fix this. I want to make everything right. Please. Their sudden change of heart was almost comical. Almost. I couldn't help but laugh, a deep, hearty sound that felt cleansing. You three are something else, you know that? But here's a newsflash for you, I'm done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, and the so-called family that only values me for my bank account. I turned to leave, their protests and pleas fading into the background. They called after me, a mix of desperation and disbelief in their voices, but I didn't look back. Not this time. After the spectacle at Judy and Martin's house, I was done. Not just with them, but with the whole sorry saga that had become my life. I needed a fresh start, a clean slate. So, I took some time, holed up at my folks' place, getting my head and heart back in the game. One afternoon, a couple of weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was out for coffee with Sarah, my ever-supportive friend who had been there through it all. Girl, you look like a weight's been lifted, she commented, sipping her latte. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. You have no idea. It's like I can finally breathe again. Sarah leaned in, her expression turning serious. So, what's next for you, Jess? You've got a clean slate now. I thought about it, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out. Maybe I'll travel, pick up some of the charity work I had to put on hold. As for love, I paused, giving her a wry smile. I think I'll give that a miss for a while. Just make sure you're doing what makes you happy, okay? You deserve it after all that drama, she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Thanks, Sarah. That's the plan. Not long after that conversation, my phone started buzzing with calls and messages from Alex. He was pleading, saying he'd changed, that we could start over. His parents even got in on the act, sending messages filled with apologies and invitations to talk things over. Sitting in my room, phone in hand, I couldn't help but laugh. The sheer audacity was almost admirable. Almost. I typed out a response, one I'd been mulling over for days. Alex, moving on means moving forward, not going back to what broke you. I wish you all the best, but this is where our paths end for good. Take care. Hitting send felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd been stuck in for too long. And just like that, I was ready to start writing a new one. The next few months were a blur of activity. I threw myself into my work, took up volunteering with a vengeance, and even booked a solo trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Life was full, and for the first time in a long while, it was fulfilling too. One evening, sitting on a balcony overlooking a bustling street in a far-off city, I realized I'd found what I'd been searching for all along: peace. The drama, the heartache, the betrayal, it all seemed like a distant memory. My phone buzzed with a new message, but this time, it was from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I opened it. It was from someone I'd met during my travels, someone who'd made me laugh and think in equal measure. Hey, Jessica. How about dinner when you're back? No expectations, just food and good company. I stared at the message, a smile slowly spreading across my face. Maybe it was time to open my heart again, but on my terms, at my pace. Yes, I'd like that. I typed back, hitting send before I could second-guess myself. Looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. I had moved on, not just from Alex and his family, but from the person I was when I was with them. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. Life as a cop in the city doesn't just harden you, it armors you in cynicism, thicker than a bulletproof vest. That was me, Lena, a 35-year-old lieutenant turned private eye, carrying around a baggage of distrust larger than the cases I solved. My beat? Cheating spouses and human deceit. Not exactly the backdrop for a love story, huh? Then came Michael, Mr. Contemporary Art, into my life like a fresh brushstroke on a worn-out canvas. We met at this art show in New York. The place was packed with the kind of people who use words like postmodern and avant-garde without a hint of irony. I was out of my element, feeling more like a fish on a bicycle than a fish in water. Interesting piece, isn't it? That was Michael, breaking the ice as he stood next to me, gazing at what looked like a pile of trash artfully arranged on a pedestal. I glanced at him, then back at the art. If by interesting you mean I've seen better-looking garbage in an alley, then yeah, fascinating. He laughed, a rich, hearty sound that made more than a few heads turn. I'm Michael, he said, extending his hand. Lena. And before you ask, no, I don't get modern art. I'm just here to support a friend. That's refreshing. Most people here pretend to see things that aren't there. Ah, so you're an art truther? Our banter flowed effortlessly, and before I knew it, we were grabbing coffee, talking about everything and nothing. Michael was 40, looked like he stepped out of a GQ magazine, and had the manners of a bygone era. Fast forward 6 months, and I'm head over heels, living in a whirlwind romance that felt too good to be true. Michael had this old-world charm about him, reading me poetry, taking me to the most exquisite exhibitions, and treating me like I was the only woman in the world. One evening, in the middle of Central Park under a canopy of stars, Michael went down on one knee. Lena, will you marry me? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. Hell yes. The engagement was a blur of happiness. I found myself daydreaming about a future filled with love, kids, and laughter. But you know what they say about things too good to be true. My first reality check came in the form of Michael's mother, Evelyn. She was the ice queen incarnate, scrutinizing me with a look that could curdle milk. So, you're a detective. Isn't that a bit unladylike? she asked during our first dinner together. Depends on what century your definition of ladylike comes from, I shot back, not missing a beat. Michael gave me a tight smile, but I could see the warning in his eyes. Lena's one of the best detectives in the city, Mom. Evelyn sniffed. I suppose that's one way to meet men. I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. And here I thought it was to stop crime and serve justice. Silly me. Dinner passed in a tense truce, with Michael playing peacemaker. As we left, he squeezed my hand. She'll come around, Lena. Give it time. Evelyn's visits were frequent, each one a little inspection tour of our life. It was a Tuesday evening, barely 2 weeks into our marriage, when she dropped by unannounced, her arrival heralding a chill in the air. Lena, darling, she began, her voice dripping with a condescension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I see you're still clinging to your little job. I had hoped marriage would have made a proper lady out of you. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, the knife in my hand suddenly feeling very appealing for reasons other than cooking. Evelyn, where I come from, we call this making a living. You should try it sometime instead of living off others. Her lips tightened, but she maintained her composure. Michael was raised with certain expectations. It's not too late to choose a more respectable profession. Something less masculine. Respectable? You mean like being a professional busybody? I retorted, not bothering to mask the bite in my voice. No thanks, I'll stick to catching cheaters and liars. Speaking of which, how's your bridge club going? Michael walked in just then, his timing as impeccable as ever. What's going on here? He asked, looking from me to his mother. Your wife was just explaining her career choice to me. It seems I've underestimated the thrill of working with criminals, Evelyn said, her tone saccharine. Michael sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Mom, Lena's job is important to her. It's who she is. And Lena. He turned to me, a pleading look in his eyes. Please, let's not do this now. I wanted to argue, to tell him that his mother was crossing lines she shouldn't even be seeing, but I held back. This was his mother, after all. Fine, I muttered, turning back to my vegetables with more force than necessary. The evenings following Evelyn's visits were always tense. Michael would become distant, retreating into a shell I couldn't crack. It was clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. One such evening, after a particularly grueling visit from Evelyn, who had criticized everything from my cooking to the way I folded towels, I confronted Michael. Why don't you ever stand up for me? Your mother treats me like I'm the dirt under her shoe, and you just let her. What kind of marriage is this? Michael looked at me, weary. Lena, she's old, set in her ways. What do you want me to do? Disown her? No, I want you to have my back. To tell her she can't walk all over me, us. Is that too much to ask? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'll talk to her, okay? Just give it some time. She'll come around. But she didn't. And neither did he. The divide grew, Evelyn's disdain and Michael's inaction wedging a gap between us that felt insurmountable. It was clear this was more than just a rough start. This was a glimpse into what my future held if something didn't change. Living with Michael started to feel like I was in one of those dramatic TV shows where the cracks slowly start showing in the perfect facade. He worked at this fancy art gallery, which sounded posh until you realized his paycheck was as unpredictable as the weather in spring. Meanwhile, I was doing pretty well for myself, pulling in enough to keep us comfortable, living in a spacious apartment in a nice part of the city. I remember one evening, the conversation at dinner turned towards the future. I was talking about maybe, eventually, wanting to buy a house, have a bit of space for when we decided to start a family. Michael, fork halfway to his mouth, paused and gave me this look. Lena, I'm not sure where you're getting these ideas from. We don't need a house. And me getting another job? That's not on the table. I put my fork down, trying to keep my voice level. It's not about needing, Michael. It's about planning for the future. And it wouldn't hurt to have a more stable income, you know? He laughed, a sound that used to warm my heart but now just grated on my nerves. You and your obsession with money. It's always about the bottom line with you, isn't it? Money isn't everything, Lena. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. Easy for you to say when you're not the one worrying about paying the bills every month. I'm not obsessed with money. I just don't want to end up struggling. Michael shrugged, going back to his food like we were discussing the weather. I'm happy with our life as it is. You're the one who's never satisfied. I stood up, my appetite gone. Maybe I wouldn't be so focused on money if you contributed more than just criticism about how I manage ours. He didn't look up. I contribute in other ways. Not everything is about money, Lena. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. It wasn't just about the house or the kids or even the money. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which seemed to matter to Michael as long as the status quo kept his life easy. His accusations of my so-called obsession with money were a convenient deflection from his unwillingness to confront the reality of our situation. On what started as a mundane Sunday, the living room transformed into the stage for an unexpected drama when Evelyn, my not-so-beloved mother-in-law, decided it was the perfect day for a visit. With her arrival came an air of tension, thick enough to slice through. She was glued to her phone, her voice fluctuating between panic and confusion, as she navigated through a conversation that set off every red flag in my book. And you're saying my social security number has been suspended? How much do I need to pay to fix this? Evelyn's voice cracked as she fumbled through her purse, pulling out her checkbook and a slew of documents, her hands shaking with a mix of age and fear. I was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, when my ears picked up the mention of social security and payment. Years on the force had honed my instincts, and every fiber of my being screamed, scam. I rushed into the living room, my approach silent but swift. Evelyn, hang up the phone. It's a scam, I interjected, my voice firm yet composed, hoping to convey urgency without inciting panic. She whipped around, eyes wide with shock and offense. I beg your pardon. I'm handling this, Lena. There's no need for your intrusion. But before she could continue her protest, I reached out, my hand clamping down on the phone, and ended the call with a decisive click. The room fell into a stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Evelyn recoiled as if I had slapped her, her face contorting into an expression of fury and disbelief. How dare you? That was incredibly rude and uncalled for. Who do you think you are, treating me like some naive child? Michael, drawn into the living room by the commotion, stood at the threshold, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. Lena, what's going on? Why are you upsetting my mother? I turned to him, my frustration mounting. That call was from scammers, Michael. They were trying to con Evelyn out of her money by claiming her social security number was suspended. This is a common tactic. I've seen it 100 times. Michael rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I knew meant he was in a tight spot. Okay, but couldn't you have been a bit more diplomatic about it? Evelyn, gathering her things with trembling hands, shot me a look that could curdle milk. I don't need to be saved, especially not by someone who treats me with such disrespect. I'm leaving. We'll see what the bank says about this so-called scam. She stormed out, leaving a cold silence in her wake. Michael sighed, looking between the door and me. Lena, I know you meant well, but you have to handle things more gently, especially with my mother. I felt a twinge of guilt but stood my ground. I know it seemed harsh, but there wasn't time for pleasantries. Scammers rely on creating a sense of urgency. Hesitation could have cost her dearly. The next day, curiosity and a hint of guilt nudged me to call Evelyn. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice cold and clipped. What do you want, Lena? I just wanted to check in after yesterday. Did you talk to the bank about the call? There was a pause, and when she spoke, her voice was laced with reluctant admission. Yes, I did. They confirmed it was a scam. But that doesn't change how you handled the situation. You were rude and aggressive. I pinched the bridge of my nose, a headache brewing at the edge of my temples. I'm sorry if I came across that way. I was just trying to protect you from getting scammed. These people are professional liars, and they're very good at what they do. Her response was a scoff, tinged with a begrudging sort of gratitude. Well, I suppose I should thank you for preventing a mistake. But don't think this means I approve of your methods or your attitude. Goodbye, Lena. The chill between Michael and me had settled in deep, turning our home into more of a frosty standoff than a warm haven. I clung to the hope that his upcoming birthday might thaw the ice, a chance to fan the dying embers of our relationship. Dreaming of a weekend filled with just the two of us, I planned every detail, hoping to rekindle what was once there. But as fate, or rather, Evelyn, would have it, she bulldozed through my plans with her own agenda, setting up a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday, of all times. Knowing my schedule was jam-packed, it felt like a deliberate jab. I pleaded with her over the phone. Can't we just push it to Saturday? I'm swamped at work, Evelyn. Her voice was a mix of honey and ice. No, dear. This is when it's happening. Michael shouldn't have to adjust his birthday around your occupations. Biting back frustration, I found myself confiding in my boss, the only person who seemed to get it. He's seen enough deceit and betrayal to fill a noir novel, yet he understood the importance of this gesture. Go, he urged, with a knowing look. Do what you need to do. Arriving at Evelyn's, the party was in full swing, a spectacle of faux merriment. Evelyn spotted me like a shark senses blood, her smile tight as she hastily whispered something to Michael. There he was, Michael, my husband, ensconced by the fireplace, his arm around a woman who was clearly more than just a casual acquaintance. My heart twisted, but I steeled myself and approached. Michael, aren't you going to introduce me? I asked, injecting a calm I didn't feel into my voice. He jerked like he'd been electrocuted, his eyes wide. Ah, Lena, this is Aisha from the gallery, he mumbled, then turned to her. And this is, Lena, a relative. The room might as well have spun. A relative? Seriously, Michael? Your wife, remember? I couldn't keep the incredulity and anger from my voice, the words echoing louder than intended. A hush fell over the room, all eyes on us. Michael's face reddened, a mixture of embarrassment and irritation flashing across his features. You know, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority, he retorted sharply, turning away as if dismissing me from his presence. Before I could recover, Evelyn slithered over, her voice dripping with disdain. You see, Lena, you just don't fit in here. Michael needs someone supportive, like Aisha, not, whatever this is. Her words were a slap, each one designed to cut. I think it's best if you leave. You're clearly not wanted here, she hissed, gesturing towards the door as if banishing me from my own life. You know what, Evelyn? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong in a family that thrives on lies and deception. With dignity I barely felt, I walked out, the silence of the night wrapping around me like a cold embrace. After the debacle at Michael's birthday and the cold truth that followed, I knew I needed solid proof if I was going to end this marriage on my terms. The thought of tailing Michael myself was too much. I'm used to digging up dirt on strangers, not the man I once thought I'd grow old with. So, I turned to Dave, a colleague of mine with a knack for uncovering the most discreet affairs. Hey, Dave, I need a favor, I said, trying to keep my voice steady over the phone. Anything for you. What's up? His reply was immediate, the loyalty in his voice a small comfort in my storm of betrayal. It's Michael. I know he's seeing someone. I need evidence, I confessed, feeling a mix of relief and dread admitting it out loud. Say no more. I'll handle it discreetly. You'll have what you need in no time, Dave assured me, his confidence soothing some of my anxiety. True to his word, Dave delivered. Photos, audio clips, the works. It was damning. The woman, Aisha, was indeed more than just a colleague. Worse, she was here illegally, looking for a quick marriage to secure her status. She was also a fraud. Part of me wanted to confront Michael, to throw the evidence in his face and watch him squirm. But then I remembered the condescending remarks, his dismissive attitude, and that smug look he always had. No, he didn't deserve my concern or my help. Filing for divorce felt like ripping off a band-aid on a wound that had been festering for too long. I demanded financial compensation for his betrayal. It was the least he could do after everything. The fallout was explosive. Evelyn, ever the dragon lady, took his side, painting me as the villain. But I stood my ground, fueled by the evidence and the injustice of their accusations. The ink on the divorce papers wasn't just dry, it was a testament to a new chapter one was desperate to write for myself. Opening my own detective agency wasn't just a dream come true, it was a rebirth, a new dawn from the ashes of my past life with Michael. The agency quickly gained a reputation for discretion and effectiveness, a reflection of the lessons learned from my personal saga. One day, as the sun poured into my new office, illuminating the framed license on the wall, Jessie, my right-hand woman and friend, popped her head in. "Boss lady, you've got a minute? We've got a potential big case. A woman suspecting her husband of having an affair. Wants the full works, surveillance, photos, the lot." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. "Sounds like our bread and butter. Do we have details?" Jessie nodded, laying the file on my desk. "Yeah, but there's a catch. She's got a tight budget. Really tight." I thought about it for a moment. This was my chance to pay it forward, to help someone who was possibly in the same boat I'd been in not so long ago. Tell her we'll work with her budget. And Jess, let's make sure we're thorough. I know too well what it's like being on the other side of this conversation. Jessie's grin was wide. "Knew you'd say that. You're a good person, you know that?" "Try telling that to my ex," I quipped, but the jest didn't reach my eyes. The case was as straightforward as it gets in our line of work. Infidelity, secrets, and lies, a pattern I'd become all too familiar with. But with each case we closed, I felt a piece of myself heal, a validation of my decision to start anew. One morning, as the city was slowly waking up, an elderly lady stormed into my office, her frustration palpable. She was ranting to my receptionist about her son's wife who had apparently vanished with a considerable amount of money, leaving them in financial ruin. She insisted on speaking with the owner, mentioning something about needing a payment plan. Curious, I decided to meet her myself. Imagine my surprise when I came face to face with Evelyn, my former mother-in-law. The shock in her eyes mirrored mine, but embarrassment quickly took over her features. "I run this agency, Evelyn. How can I help?" I managed to say, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Recognition dawned on her, followed by a flicker of shame. But, true to form, she recovered quickly, her desperation making her bold. "Lena, you have to help me find her, the woman who ran off with my son's money. Michael's in shambles. Do it for family's sake, without charge." The audacity of her request left me speechless for a moment. The same woman who sided with Michael without a second thought now stood in my office, asking for a favor as if the past had never happened. "Evelyn, first, we're not family. Second, I run a business, not a charity for wayward ex-in-laws," I responded, my tone firm. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me, but I wasn't about to let old wounds dictate my decisions. "But Lena, after everything, can't you do this one thing? It's the least you could do," she pressed, her voice a mix of plea and demand. I couldn't help but laugh, albeit bitterly. "The least I could do? Evelyn, after your son cheated on me, you expected me to just forgive and forget? I suggest you go to the police. They're better equipped to handle missing persons and fraud." She stood there, flabbergasted, as if the thought of me refusing her had never crossed her mind. "But Lena..." "No, Evelyn. I learned a valuable lesson from Michael and from you, never to trust scammers and liars. It's time you learned the same," I interrupted, my decision final. Life indeed comes full circle, but it's up to us to decide how we close that loop. For me, it was by standing firm in my values and looking forward, not back. A week had barely passed since Evelyn's little episode in my office when my phone buzzed with a number I'd thought I'd erased from my life. Michael. Seeing his name flash on the screen was like stepping back into a world I'd left behind. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. Michael, what do you want? My tone was guarded, ready for whatever spiel he had prepared. Lena, I've been thinking, a lot. I want us to start over, get back together. Have kids, you know? His voice had that old familiar blend of hope and something I once mistook for sincerity. I couldn't help but let out a snort. Really? And where would we live in this fantasy of yours? There was a hint of excitement in his reply. Oh, it's all planned out. We'll live with my mom at first. Save some money, then you can buy us a big house. It'll be perfect. I laughed, louder this time, the absurdity of the situation hitting me full force. You're just as arrogant as ever, Michael. You think I'd come back, just to play house with you and your mom, and then foot the bill for a big house? He stumbled over his words, the desperation clear in his voice. But Lena, I've changed. We can fix everything. Please. The silence stretched between us as I considered the years wasted, the tears shed, and the painstaking journey to rebuild myself from the ruins he'd left behind. Michael, you haven't changed a bit. Goodbye. With that, I hung up, the finality of the gesture sealing the door on the past. As the silence settled around me, a sense of peace enveloped my heart. The call, absurd as it was, served as the ultimate validation of my growth, my resilience, and my independence. I had built a new life, a successful career, and reclaimed my sense of self, none of which would have been possible had I stayed trapped in a marriage that diminished me. Michael's call was nothing more than a blip on the radar, a fleeting reminder of how far I'd come. The future stretched out before me, bright and filled with promise, a blank canvas ready to be painted with new dreams, new challenges, and new achievements. As I turned my attention back to the work that had given me purpose and a sense of belonging, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. After all, the best revenge is living well, and I intended to do just that.